right. Good morning, everybody. If I can have your attention and you can get your seats. I am pleased to call to order our public meeting today devoted to the first Internet Gaming Forum. This is March 11th. We're at the Convention Center in Boston, as we usually are, and I'm pleased to call this meeting to order. I get to welcome you this morning, and I get to introduce this session, although the real architect of the session is Commissioner McHugh, whom you will hear from in just a few minutes. I want to read to you, as I do this, the mission statement of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, because this session relates very much to that. The mission statement reads, "The Massachusetts Gaming Commission will strive to ensure that its decision-making and regulatory systems engender the confidence of the public and participants, and that they provide the greatest possible economic development benefits and revenues to the people of the Commonwealth, reduce to the maximum extent possible the potentially negative or unintended consequences of the new legislation, and allow an appropriate return on investment for gaming providers that assures the operation of casino resorts of the highest quality." Today's session is doing each one of those things. We're conducting our session in open, streaming on the public, as part of the participatory and transparent process that we're committed to. We are having this gaming forum in conjunction with the rollout of our problem gaming framework in order that our plans for internet gaming can be developed hand in glove with our plans for problem gambling and minimization of those issues. We are obviously exploring new revenue opportunities, which is a principal mandate of ours. And we're doing it in conjunction with our casino applicants and our casino licensee, our one licensee, Penn National. Where are you? Welcome, thank you. Because the only condition that we have suggested to the legislature that was central to our approach to this is that as the Commonwealth begins to deal with internet gaming, we shouldn't do anything serious until the casino licenses are awarded, and the casino licenses can be at the table as part of that conversation. They are going to be spending hundreds of millions, in some cases upwards of $1 billion, to invest in the licenses that they are being awarded, and it's only appropriate that they be at the table when we figure out where we're going to go with internet gaming. So this public forum and this exploration of internet gaming is central to our overall focus. In the long run, it seems to me that there are two issues that we have to deal with in Massachusetts. Number one is, will we have internet gaming? And if so, how will that be organized? And two is, if we have internet gaming, who will regulate it and how will it be regulated? Commissioner Zuniga and I, who is another one of our commissioners, served on Treasurer Grossman's Internet Task Force that I think you may hear a little bit more about in a few minutes. And we made one central point to him as we were all sitting there together starting to talk about, in an earlier stage of this evolutionary process, how do we approach internet gaming? And we said, this cannot be about the Gaming Commission protecting its turf. This can't be about the lottery protecting its turf, although the lottery has a lot of turf, important turf to protect. And this can't be about the casino operators protecting their turf. This has to be a process by which we rise up above the whole Megillah and look at the broadest public interest. What serves the public interest the best? What generates the most revenues and other economic benefits? What minimizes the damage? What is the fairest, most efficient, most effective process, independent of the other things that we have going on? That was what we felt was the most important mandate for this process of figuring out how are we going to handle internet gaming, and I know Treasurer Grossman agreed with that. So this is another step in the evolution of that process to figure out where we're going in internet gaming. My second responsibility today is to introduce to you a man who was uniquely suited to lead us in that conversation and to introduce us to a fair process. Majority Leader Stan Rosenberg, State Senator from Amherst. Senator Rosenberg's resume is in your folder. I talked to his aide, Rose Adams, the other day trying to learn a few things She didn't tell me any really good stuff, but I wanted to try to learn a few things that weren't so commonly known about Senator Rosenberg. I didn't know that he was raised in Revere, so he has an interest in the Western Mass, but also in the Eastern Mass license. I also didn't know that Senator Rosenberg was raised in foster care, which maybe accounts in part for the sensitivity that he brings to a lot of the social issues that the Commonwealth is wrestling with, and that he created what is surely the first and maybe the only foster care caucus made up of members of the legislature who had been in foster care. How many are there? Are there others?
There were 4.
There were 4. First foster care caucus in a legislature, a fairly remarkable notion. I can tell you from personal experience, and this is more remarkable than anything, that Senator Rosenberg answers all his emails personally and quickly. I can tell you, unfortunately, that a lot of emails to state rep and state senators' offices never get answered by anybody. Senator Rosenberg answers his, and quickly. I don't know how you do it, but it is admirable, and it says something about his commitment to the people that he serves. Most important of all is Stan Rosenberg was the principal legislative architect of our legislation in Massachusetts, about which I hope he will tell you some. All of the commissioners here, Commissioner Gail Cameron, Commissioner Jim McHugh, whom you'll meet, Commissioner Bruce Stebbins, Commissioner Enrique Zuniga, and I, have all talked about what a remarkable piece of legislation we have. Many regulators from across the country have talked about what a remarkable piece of legislation we had. To wit, we did have a lot of your experience to build on, but in terms of issues like problem gambling, issues like local control, issues like the independence of the Gaming Commission, issues like research into the economic and social impacts of gaming, on and on and on. We have extraordinary tools to do the job as well as it can possibly be done. And that was due in very, very large part to the really remarkable work of Stan Rosenberg. Lastly, I just want to tell you that in my experience with him, and this is not something you say every day about public officials, he is a man of uncommon grace, of uncommon integrity, and of uncommon commitment to the public good. It's my pleasure to work with him, Stan Rosenberg.
Thank you very much. I didn't know I was coming to my funeral this morning. Thank you. Those are very gracious and generous comments. And I have to say, this is a mutual admiration society, because I think that all of the commissioners and the commission staff under the leadership of Steve Crosby is meeting the challenge as we laid it out in the legislature, the vision that we had for an open, transparent, honest process that would leave none questioning the decisions and the integrity of the licensees, the licenses, and the operations of the expanded gaming that we were voting on would be in any way suspect, and I think you guys have done an absolutely terrific job. There are always bumps along the road, especially when you're creating something totally new, and this is a very competitive industry, as we all know who are in this room, and so I think you folks should take great pride in the work that you're doing, and I, as one legislator, appreciate and acknowledge that in every way, anytime that I can, to anyone, including this audience. So I have the easiest and most pleasant task of the day, because I get to say a few words and then I go back to the State House. Your job here today is to really think deeply and learn from each other about this new frontier that we have to deal with. It's, in my mind, it's really quite an irony, maybe that's not the best word, but it's really quite extraordinary that this state, which is one of the last blue law states in the country, has been, over the last 40 years or so, it's probably heading on to 50 years now, been gradually taking on the new frontiers and the new opportunities that legalized gaming provides, understanding that gaming has been games of chance and gaming of various sorts have been part of human civilization for as far back as we know and can study and learn. And we were late coming to a lot of these things, but when we come to them with great care and great attention. And as most of you know in this audience, our lottery is the highest per capita lottery in the country. Highest per capita spending on lottery in the country is here in Massachusetts, with almost $1 billion of proceeds going to our cities and towns. So our schools and our public works and our police and fire are now dependent upon this revenue source. And our treasurers have worked very hard with our lottery commission to stay at the cutting edge of that field and run a good operation that has integrity and the trust of the public. And as a result, there's great spending on lottery tickets. It provides significant number of jobs, helps significant number of small businesses where these Keno machines and lottery machines are located all over the Commonwealth. And I think we do a very credible job with that. For decades, there was debate generated from different quarters about whether we ought to go into the next phase of legalized gaming, which would be obviously casinos and slot parlors. And the legislature just off and on for decade after decade after decade. Finally, I would argue with several themes or several situations that we were dealing with, the most significant of which is Governor Patrick comes into office, realizes that the Mashpee Wampanoag are very close to gaining federal recognition, which then means land and trust, which then means gaming under the federal law at the highest level allowed under state law without taxation, regulation, or state government interference. And he says this is not a good idea. We need to be partners. We need to respect the tribe. We need to work with them. We need to help them succeed at their economic development and whatever else they may need to work on. And if they're going to go into gaming, and the tribe made clear that they would go into gaming, then we had to put in place a regulatory structure. It didn't hurt, or maybe it was hurting, that we're surrounded by casinos, New York, Connecticut, Maine, Rhode Island, casinos or slot parlors, and it was draining $1.2, $1.4 billion worth of discretionary income into surrounding states, creating jobs and tax revenues from our residents. And so we finally reached the point where we understood that we couldn't ignore the reality, and we weren't going to be probably the last state, and we should definitely not be the last state in New England if we wanted to operate in a reasonable and productive fashion here by going in this direction. So we put together, as the commissioner said, pretty aggressive legislation. We had the benefit of knowing what 33 or so other states had done, the mistakes they made, the opportunities they missed, and we were able to craft legislation to address the industry in a way that would balance their success with appropriate government regulation and benefit, and also mitigate the negative impacts which are regrettable but inevitable when you have gaming. And so now we're on a new frontier, and the truth is we couldn't get our heads around internet gaming during the final stages of working on the legislation. So we, working with the state treasurer, he put together a task force because obviously the lottery has a direct interest in how internet gaming might play out with our help or without our help, and I think that's a critical point. We can't control the internet, we can't control what's happening across borders, so we have to figure out how to manage it, how to work with it. And in relation to gaming legislation, we realized that was just too much for us to take on to try to figure out at that time how to integrate the internet gaming policy with the new frontier that we were entering. And so we decided not to try to take on more than we could at that point. And we, I guess the technical term is that we punted and gave the commission the job of monitoring federal legislation, because then Congressman Frank had legislation for online poker and internet gaming. And then we would work together to watch what's going to happen down the road and try to figure out how to do as good a job in this area if we're going to head in that direction as we did with setting up and managing our lottery, and now with our expanded gaming with casinos and slot parlors. So you do the hard work today of listening to some very good presentations and engaging in active thinking and discussion as part of a process where eventually we need to craft some specific policy. You're going to hear from Senator Flanagan later today, and she and I spoke on the floor last Thursday, floor of the Senate, and she is, I believe, planning to attend a couple of national meetings over the course of the next couple of months on the subject of internet gaming so that we could start to build some depth within the Senate in terms of understanding the complexity of this issue and what we could do to manage this as well as we are managing our other gaming activities if we find ourselves in the position of putting legislation in place. I personally don't see how we avoid it, because I don't know how you keep people in their living rooms and dining rooms and bedrooms with laptops from engaging. And we don't want to kill the goose that laid the golden egg in our state lottery, and the new goose that is hopefully going to lay some golden eggs for us in the coming months and years, the casino and slot parlor. So we'll look forward to working with you in the coming months to see if we can get our heads around this policy area. We'll be looking to the Commission for significant advice and guidance. Let's say guidance, maybe that'd probably be the strongest word we could use, huh? Guidance. And we'll look to the State Treasurer's Office as well, given the work that they've done. And then we will look to people like you in the audience here to help us figure out the best path forward in this policy area so that we do the best job possible, and we also not only take into consideration the realities of how we would manage this and deal with all of the pieces on the business end, but also on the social mitigation end. And I think for many of us in the legislature for whom this was a difficult issue, that is the creation of expanded gaming in the form of casinos and slot parlor, we were very, very mindful and very concerned about social impacts, and I think most of us take some significant pride in the fact that we think we got a lot of that right. And we're looking forward to seeing, under the Gaming Commission's leadership and direction, ensuring that we're treating our communities, those who are stressed by addiction, and our businesses, from the cultural organizations to the small businesses on Main Street, that we always be sensitive to them and try to be helpful as this plays out. And we need to do the same thing when we get to the question of internet gaming. We have to think about all of the positives, and we have to think about all of the negatives, and we have to come up with a balanced approach to ensure that we're getting the best of what can come of it if we go in this direction, and we address to the greatest extent possible the downsides that might arise as a result. So thank you for spending your time here today, learning, engaging, and we'll look forward to working with you in the months ahead in trying to craft sensible policy in this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Rosenberg. We will be back in touch. It's my pleasure now to introduce to you, as I said, the real architect of this conference. As Senator Rosenberg said, the Commission is tasked with trying to track what's going on around the country and begin to develop a position on where the Commonwealth should go in collaboration with the Treasurer and with the Legislature. Commissioner Jim McHugh, former Judge Jim McHugh, volunteered to take on the job of leading the Commission in its pursuit of internet gaming, and he has put this whole thing together. He is, in addition to being one of the most, maybe the most distinguished member of the Commission, previously was one of the most distinguished members of the judiciary in Massachusetts and actually across the country. Jim McHugh, thank you.
I didn't know I was coming to my wake. Thank you very much, Steve, and it's a great pleasure to kick this off today. Steve said that I'm the architect of it. Rick Day, our executive director, and I have been working closely together to put this day together, and it's an important day. We're a little shy of 2 weeks after issuing our first license. We've got another set of licenses to issue in the upcoming months. And as that building process that Senator Stan Rosenberg talked about gets underway, we need to think about the other components of the setting in which it's occurring. One of those components you've heard about is the lottery. We want to talk about that today. We have, as Senator Rosenberg said, one of the most deeply penetrated, probably the most deeply penetrated lottery in the country. It is the largest source of unattached aid to cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth. They depend on it. It's an asset that has to be preserved. The internet is another element that we're all facing today. Every one of us in this room is facing today. It's the now pervasive medium to which all of us turn daily, if not hourly, and it has implications for all of us, and it has implications for this process. And so how to combine the brick and mortar casinos and the lottery and the internet is a real challenge, and a challenge that we're going to explore today. We're going to have a discussion about the issues in this setting. This morning we're going to look at what is or could be available on the internet right now, the status of internet gaming domestically and across the world. We'll take a peek at what's going on in Europe. And we're going to take a look at some of the risks that this new medium poses. After lunch, we're going to take a look, a deeper look, at what 4 states, Delaware, New Jersey, Nevada, and 4 states, 3 states and a province, the government of Ontario is doing and planning to do in this space. And we'll wrap it up with a panel on which we'll discuss the implications of what we've heard during the course of the day. So that's the setting. We're not focusing on a specific outcome. We're not here to advocate a particular outcome. We're here to explore, we're here to learn, we're here to think, and we're here to think deeply. We regret that the lottery, the Massachusetts lottery, was unable to send representatives to join us today, but we look forward to continuing to work with them as we proceed. And we do have some terrific people with deep experience, both in lotteries and in internet gaming, who've joined us from London, from Ontario, from Las Vegas, California, up and down the East Coast, and we're delighted to have them with us. This is, as almost all of our commission meetings are, being live streamed, and our audience, no doubt, will be as eager as we are to hear what all of the speakers have to say. So, without further ado, let's get to it. On the theory that it's better to know what you're talking about before you begin to talk about it, we're going to start with some demonstrations of what we mean when we talk about social gaming and internet gaming. James Stern, who's joined us from London, who's the head of business development and sales for IGT Interactive, a leading provider of internet gaming content, will talk to us about Double Down, a leading social gaming provider, and then show us a sampling of their other offerings. So James, thank you for being with us, and it's all yours.
Thank you. Does this work? Perfect. So firstly, thank you very much for inviting me to talk today about interactive gaming and social gaming. I'm here, as Jim quite rightly said, from London. I'm actually joined by my colleague and Director of Compliance for IGT Interactive, Lynn Dayton, who's here to field any questions, if any arise. So the topic I'm going to talk about is really what is internet and social gaming, and I thought the best way to approach this was really to look at social gaming to start with. So social gaming and social games are typically played online on a mobile device and have a social element. Basically, from what I'm trying to explain, is that people play with or directly against their friends, participate in leaderboards, chat rooms, or share progress via the social network. So it really is what it's titled, social gaming. There's a social element. It's all about enjoyment. It's all about experience and engagement with your friends and other people online. It's estimated that 750 million people play worldwide on games such as Farmville, Candy Crush, and a variety of social casinos, including Double Down, which is really where I'm going to focus my presentation with regards to social. The vast majority of players do play for free. However, it is possible to voluntarily purchase virtual credits for extended or enhanced play, and that would be through progressions in leaderboards, unlocking of new levels, etc. There are no payouts or prizes in money or money equivalents, and no stakes of value that can be won or lost. People engage in casino-style games typically for entertainment and leisure purposes, and like I say, to socialise and for a sense of achievement. So Double Down Casino, now it's the 4th largest game overall on Facebook. It's number 4 on iPad in 2013. Currently we have on average 1.8 million daily players, and that's actually unique players, and that's 6.6 million monthly unique players. The average player spends approximately 29.3 minutes per day. That's at their computer or mobile device, and that's equivalent to what we're seeing in other social games such as Candy Crush and Farmville, Angry Birds, and such. The average user session is approximately 19 minutes, and the average player plays 1.6 times per day. In Double Down Casino, we really try and offer the same experience that you'd expect to achieve in a Vegas-style casino, but obviously purely from an entertainment perspective. So we offer a variety of slots, and we're constantly updating our slot portfolio, releasing new games every 2 weeks. We offer 3 different types of poker, and that's actually multi-hand poker. So it's all the popular formats of poker, Texas Hold'em, Omaha. 8 kinds of video poker. There's also a bingo product, and finally our table content such as blackjack and roulette. So how to play Double Down. So Double Down is actually an app on Facebook, but you don't have to register on Facebook to be able to play Double Down. You can go to www.doubledowncasino.com and actually play as a guest, and I'll explain this a little bit further shortly. But this would be the landing page you'd hit if you were to go to Double Down. And as you can see, it offers you the ability to log in via Facebook or play as a guest. If you're playing as a guest, you're limited to 30 minutes just to try the experience, and then really what it's trying to do is prompt you to obviously register through your Facebook. It uses something called Facebook Connect, which is what thousands of businesses use worldwide. Effectively, Facebook Connect pre-populates your registration by using the information that you've already entered in your Facebook account. So it's just a simple one-click procedure to be able to actually register on Double Down itself. When a player first registers and enters Double Down, they're given $1 million of virtual currency or chips. This is totally for free. And then, as I say, the player is then able to play anywhere they like within the actual Double Down casino experience itself. Players do have the ability to purchase more credits and allow themselves to progress further through the game and enhance their experience. So I'm going to take you briefly to Double Down, because I realise we're obviously tight for time. But if I take you into the actual Double Down casino itself, this is the landing page in the lobby you would see. So here are my virtual credits available to me. You have the ability, like I say, to buy chips. Every time you visit Double Down Casino, you're awarded more free chips in the form of a wheel that's spun, and it allows you to have a random number of free credits issued each day. So there's never any reason to actually have to purchase credits. It's a pure free play model. You also have the ability to gift chips to your friends and other players. And as you can see along the bottom, you actually have the leaderboards itself showing the top 10 players, and obviously you can drill down further and see all the various achievements and awards other people have won. So I'm going to demonstrate poker, but like I say, we have bingo, video poker, slots, blackjack and roulette. And my apologies for the load time, but we're actually on the Double Down Casino live site, so we are restricted to the speed of the internet. So I'm going to show Texas Hold'em. It works no different to any other internet poker product, and in terms of the actual game, it plays exactly the same as a land-based poker product as well. You choose your table by selecting what blinds you want to play at. I'll just take the first one for ease. In terms of Double Down, we've looked at our player demographics, and we can see between 65 and 70% of players are actually female. and between 65 and 70% of players are also over the age of 35. The vast majority actually appearing between the 35 and 46 age groups. So if I was to play in the hand, I'd click to sit at the table, I would choose my buy-in for the table, and then I'd be entered into the actual game itself. As you can see, all the individual players sitting around the table showing the denomination of what they have available for the game, and as I say, this is just purely free play credit. So the game plays out no different to any Texas Hold'em poker game. You play the small blind, the big blind, you're dealt the community cards, the three initial cards, then there's the turn, and then finally obviously the river, and players take it in turns obviously to bet through the poker product itself. So I'll play one quick hand just to give you an understanding. I'm dealt my cards. I'm not feeling too lucky, to be honest, but we'll, just for the purposes of this demonstration, call. There are various types of table. We're playing on a turbo table, so the idea is that it actually plays out pretty fast, but there's a variety of speeds that players can obviously play at. Obviously, if you don't make your choice within the allotted time, you're folded from the hand. It keeps the play consistent. I'm feeling very unlucky right now, but again, for the purpose of demonstrations, we'll keep playing this one through. As everyone noted, I'm also from London, so I'm quite a cautious poker player, so even though this isn't my money, I won't get too aggressive. So, as all of you will agree, I'll make a very bad decision and just keep in the hand, and I'll call this bet. Again, not my money, so I'm not too concerned. There is obviously fantastic sound along with the graphics, but obviously for the purposes of the demonstration, you would only be hearing it from my computer, and my speakers aren't the strongest, so my apologies for that. And I'll, just for the sake of this, call again. Come on, ace. So there we have two pair. Obviously I'm holding a high card ace. I'm feeling probably quite confident now, so I will bet the pot for the purposes of this demonstration. As you can see down the side, it offers hand strength, but it can also provide you play-by-play as well. And what a surprise, I lost. Feeling very lucky today. So that's our poker product. As I say, we're obviously pushed for time today. What I'd urge all of you to do is, obviously, as I said, you can play just purely as a guest by visiting doubledowncasino.com. Please do join and try out. It's, as I say, a totally free experience, and it will give you a great understanding of what we're able to deliver. Next, obviously, I really wanted to talk about internet gaming. So we touched upon social, and I really wanted to differentiate the two products themselves. So internet gaming or online gaming involves regulated and licensed gambling services that allow players to place a wager on a game of chance for the opportunity to win money. It involves the three elements of gambling, and that's obviously consideration, prize, and chance. There's multiple products available for play, including poker, casino games, sportsbook, and bingo. And obviously that's very dependent on the jurisdiction. So for example, in Europe, we find as a regulated market, France has only regulated poker. But for example, the Danish market has regulated all products. And in fact, the Danish lottery hold the monopoly on their bingo product as well. So it's very much market dependent in terms of what products have been regulated. And I'll stress maybe that's an importance when you're looking to decide your regulation. Players have the ability to access operator websites either via the PC, which we call desktop in IGT, or the mobile device. And when I talk mobile device, that's mobiles and actually tablets. And we support all formats of mobile, so that would be Android and iOS devices. And according to PricewaterhouseCoopers, the market in Europe was estimated to generate approximately $15 billion in 2030. So IGT have actually been in the interactive gaming space since 2005. Our mission is effectively to support our customers by being the world's most successful regulated iGaming provider. And just to give you an understanding of what our strategy and vision is that if we look at the casino floor of today, you have multiple vendors offering an array of content linked through various systems, including patron management and casino management, cash desk, etc. And what IGT want to deliver is the ability to offer a multiple channel offering. So that's the same game anywhere, on any device. And like I say, that would be either through the PC, through mobile, through TV, or through the EGMs. I'm not going to touch upon this much because I know the gentleman to my right is really going to be talking about platform, but what I just really wanted to highlight from the perspective of this slide was that everything in blue is what we'd consider the platform or the RVB system with regards to an internet gaming product offering. So this is really the engine that really drives your product offering. So everything in blue would be the pieces whereby players would be registering, you'd be verifying the player, it would be handling all the transactions from the perspective of deposits and withdrawals, you'd be handling all affiliate promotions and loyalty, you'd be doing your reporting and analytical piece around that, and it also holds all the various responsible gaming modules and ID verification checks, etc. So if I touch upon, once again, Denmark as a regulated market, there's a unique ID that each citizen in Denmark is allotted when they're born. It's called their NEM ID. And as part of the registration process, the Danish regulator requires that number to be entered into the registration field. And then that's actually served back to the Danish Gaming Board into their servers, so they're able to track their citizens' gameplay. And they can monitor everything on a 24-hour period. And that's against deposits, withdrawals, gameplay, per hand, per spin, what types of games were played, how long games were played for, etc. And where IGT really feature is actually the middle hexagon, which is where it says casino-style games. So we're predominantly a supplier of casino content only. So we have a system called RGS, and RGS is effectively to the right-hand side, but really what RGS stands for is it's a remote gaming server. And we have 4 data centers currently in operation, 2 in Europe, 1 in Gibraltar and 1 in Albany, that serve our regulated markets in Europe, 1 in Kamloops, which looks after the Canadian provinces such as BCLC, Lotte Quebec and shortly Ontario, and then 1 most recently in Atlantic City that looks after our business in New Jersey. And what remote gaming server effectively is it's your game library. So it's the provision of the game assets, the math models, or the logic as we'd call it in the interactive space, the game engine itself, and the random number generator. And we have our games tested and certified by 7 separate jurisdictions currently today. And as I say, as regulation requires, we then go through the recertification process once more. So I thought I'd just leave on an example of an internet gaming site from one of our partners. This is Lottomatica, it's the Italian national lottery. And as you can see, this is a perfect example of an internet gaming website. So my apologies, it's in Italian. I don't speak great Italian, but I can explain exactly what's going on here. So as a player, you would enter this site and you'd choose in the top right-hand corner, you can see the blue button that says registration. So that's where you'd enter all your registration details. If you're already an existing player, you'd use the 2 grey boxes just to the left of the blue button, and that's where you'd put in your unique username and password that would allow you access into the site. Then the green bar that runs across the top has the various games that a person would have the ability to play. So it starts with sports, then there's the poker, the casino, the live casino, the Gioco di Abitali, which I believe stands for skill games. Apologies for any Italians in the room for my pronunciation. And then obviously the lottery products they offer as well. And the main banner, which is what we'll call in the industry the call to action, it actually highlights 3 IGT games. So that's the Da Vinci Diamond, Siberian Storm, and Diamond Queen, if anyone's familiar with our products in other jurisdictions. So as a player, you'd click on one of the game icons that run along the bottom of the screen. So you can actually see 4 plus another half of 4, and that will actually load up your game. So I'll take you onto our demo site now and give you a quick demonstration of our games as well. So IGT is obviously synonymous with slot content. We produce over 100 land-based slot games a year across multiple jurisdictions. In IGT Interactive, we currently have 79 available. What we do is we actually have a mix of what we call ports, which is effectively taking a land-based game, recreating the assets for an interactive version, and actually reusing math models, but obviously rewriting the math model into Java, which is the format you have to use with regards to the logic. I'd say the most interesting and most skillful part with regards to interactive gaming is we have to be concerned with load times, because when you have an EGM, you have the ability to have 6 gigabytes worth of space, which is effectively used just purely for the assets to really give a visual appeal and for sound graphics. In the interactive space, we're limited to 24 megabytes, and that keeps load times quick and the actual spins quick. So the game plays out, and as I say, there would normally be sound as well, but apologies, it will reload. So you have the ability to choose your lines, your number of lines, right here. So this is a 20-line game. So you choose your number of lines, you can choose your line bet that produces a total bet size, and then simply you're pressing spin. In certain jurisdictions where it's legal, you also have the ability to actually have auto spin enabled. So this is the ability to effectively select a number of spins and let the game play out for you, and then obviously reap your rewards afterwards. I know that this is, as part of the topic, I was asked to demonstrate our table game, so I will finish on our roulette and blackjack variants as well. As I say, we're generally recognised for our slot games, but we do also offer fantastic table content. So first I'll start with roulette. The roulette experience from an interactive perspective should be no different to what you'd expect in a bricks and mortar business. So we have the ability here to bet on the splits, on the reds or the blacks, play the dragons. We also have the ability to bet on neighbours. So if my lucky number, for example, is 8, I'll take neighbours 5 of 8. I will choose my bet size, place my bet, and simply spin the wheel. So everything's based on the random number generator. So every outcome is totally random, so it's exactly the same experience as you would expect from a Vegas-style casino. We also have the ability to save patterns. So if you have specific bets that you do like to place, you can lay your chips, you can save your pattern into a simple location. I'll now clear these bets, and as I've been so lucky today, I'll just spray paint some chips across the table. It's very popular in the Asian market where players often just throw chips across the board. It plays out, and again, I'm feeling very lucky. Once that bet's been finished, I can then go back to the pattern I'd originally selected, which would have been one of my standard bets, and again, spin away. And then finally, I'll just quickly demonstrate our blackjack product. So again, blackjack, it follows exactly the same rules as you'd expect with regards to a bricks and mortar casino. It's a very simple game, although it's very difficult in terms of engineering from the random number generator perspective. So you place your chips, you deal your cards. Dealer's showing 4, I'll stand. And again, very lucky. So in general, that's everything I have to present today. As I say, we have a number of games available. Lynn and myself are obviously available outside of this time to answer any questions you have, and if necessary, provide any demo links to our content for you to be able to try it yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, James. That was fascinating. I hope we can we're going to spend a little bit of time this afternoon talking about the social gaming piece as well as the online gaming, because there's some very interesting implications there. But do any of the commissioners have any questions for James? We have a few minutes here, if you do.
Yeah,
Steve?
When you said that you can buy, in Double Down, you can buy additional chips, that's with real money?
Yeah, that's correct. So it's no different to any other social games. So if you think about games such as Candy Crush or Farmville, you have the ability to purchase your way to, well, in certain games it would be to unlock levels, but in other ways it would just be to increase your playing experience.
But there's no way to win it back.
No, there's absolutely no way to win. This is purely for entertainment value.
And Double Down makes money from that revenue stream, and what else? How else?
I'll divert to Lynn on that one.
Yes, that's our primary revenue stream, and ironically, there's only about 3% that actually pay for chips, but we're worldwide with this product, so.
And there's no advertising deal with Facebook somehow or other?
We do advertise, and we're part of the International Social Games Association, and that group is, the core function of that is to conduct social gaming responsibly. We only advertise to over 18.
No, I meant advertising as a revenue stream to you.
No, our primary revenue
That
stream
you
is.
bring people to Facebook or back. Okay. All right. No, interesting. So 3% of your customers pay, and that's the revenue stream.
Correct.
Wow.
But do you have any idea as to what the total social gaming revenues are for all participants in that space? It's a large number.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know that number.
All right. Maybe we can spend some time on that this afternoon, because there's some aspects of that that I think are worth exploring further. It's a very interesting space.
If you give me just 1 minute, I might have that right here. Because
I'll come back, let's come
Yeah,
back to that
let's
this
talk about
afternoon.
it,
Hold
yeah.
that thought, and we'll try and do it this afternoon. All right, James, thank you very much. That was a very succinct and yet illuminating description of both social gaming and internet gaming for pay. Jeffrey Allen is the Senior Director of Interactive at Bally Technologies, another major content and device provider. And he's going to help us understand the kinds of devices that will support internet gaming if we are headed in that regard. James touched on it a little bit. Jeffrey is now going to touch on it with a little bit more depth. He's here with Katie Lever, the Senior Vice President and General Counsel, who may have some comments about the implications for brick and mortar casinos briefly at the end if there's time. Jeffrey? Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I really appreciate that. Again, from Bally Technologies, a heartfelt thank you for inviting us to prepare and present to you today. This is very exciting for us. We've been involved in the gaming business for over 85 years and now in internet gaming and providing technologies to a wide variety of customers for the past 3 years. And we're very pleased to be here to present to you. As I prepared for this presentation and thought about some of the questions that were posed to us, it included what is internet gaming? And most importantly, how does a company devise a cross-platform strategy? And as participators in gaming across the landscape, both IGT and Bally, we are here to forward technology for our land-based customers and to help them march into the internet space as they go forward. They are all very successful providing gaming to their players in their land-based locations, and they're in need of technology and expertise in order to provide that to their players wherever they might be, and hence cross-platform strategy. So as I prepared this presentation today, I wanted to break it up into two sections. The first is an actual demonstration of what is internet gaming. And I'm going to spend a few minutes and speak about what we've launched in New Jersey. We're here in Massachusetts, so we're not able to play, but I am able to log in and I'm able to look at a couple things that differentiate internet gaming from social gaming. Similar in many regards, but different in many other regards, and I'll walk you through several of those. And then I'd like to spend the latter part of my presentation speaking specifically about cross-platform strategy, what that means to Bally, and what we believe it should mean for Massachusetts as well, as you attempt to bring technology to leverage your land-based properties as well as the internet. Bring them together and to create one all-encompassing experience for the players. So for the next few minutes, I'd like to demonstrate the Golden Nugget, New Jersey site, and then I'll follow up with a discussion of some of the cross-platform strategies that are in place and coming, and then a little bit about the benefits for the land-based casinos as we move forward. So hopefully an educational experience for you. So if you excuse me, I'm going to sit down here and do a little bit of demonstration. So what you see in front of you right now is a live internet gaming solution that's being offered in New Jersey. It's one of 7 casinos, I believe 7, that are currently offering internet gaming right now. This is the landing page. This page is being hosted by the Bally iGaming platform. And what that means is that we have an infrastructure based in New Jersey, in this case at Golden Nugget, connected to a wide variety of remote gaming servers from third parties. One of them being IGT, Bally, Amaya, and in the coming months, many other manufacturers as well delivering game content. We'll talk a little bit about the what I call ubiquity of content, bringing a mirror to the floor as we get a little farther into the presentation. The first thing I'd like to show you is the stringent registration process. I'm going to spend more time on infrastructure today rather than playing games and show some of the nuances of a regulated gaming site. This is licensed under New Jersey's DGE, so we follow their rules and regulations for providing gaming. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the sign up button here. Hopefully we have internet connection here. Oh, actually. Sorry, I was logged in. So it tells me the message that I've logged out. Okay, it's a little bit better here. So what this page is this is the page that will be experienced by the players as they attempt to register for an account. And the one thing I want to note here is the types of pieces of information that's required. Not optional, but required for the player so that we can do what's called a KYC for them. I'm not very savvy with Mac, so my apologies here. Get rid of my chat here. Oh, goodness. I apologize. It's just hard to see with this monitor here. Okay, let's try again. Okay. So here what you see are some of the fields: the first name, last name, email, password confirmation. The most important things that I want to highlight here are the need for a birth date, a social security number, and mobile number, your home address. And what we're doing is we're providing a KYC of the player before they register, meaning we use a third-party service that's actually taking the information provided by the player and performing a Know Your Customer validation so that that player's age is ascertained as well as their identification. And only after those checks are done and completed are you able to create an account for the player. This is a little bit different from a social gaming environment where you have less stringent restrictions on being able to register for an account. So I've registered for an account already. I've passed all my KYC checks. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to actually log into the site with the credentials that I have already. So you see here we have a lobby of games and services for the player. We are aggregating content. We are attempting to make a casino similar to what you would see in your land-based casino, where you have a wide variety of games that are available to you. And I'm going to navigate to the My Account section and talk a little bit about some of the specific features and things that a player can do at this site. So this is an all-encompassing menu for the player. This page you see right here, you can see how old I am. So I'm not a young. We have an avatar to prepare a picture of me when I'm playing online. We have a document section where we're able to upload documents. If we wanted to do enhanced KYC, the site can actually take documents and process them by the operational customer service people of the site. We can deposit money in. What good's a gaming site if you can't deposit money? And as I scroll down here, you'll see some of the various means of getting money into the site. So I'll describe these in just very brief detail. Credit card and debit card, we use a third-party payment processor. Automated clearinghouse is a means of linking your bank account directly to the site so that you can transfer money directly from your bank account into your gaming account. Golden Nugget prepaid card. This is a unique mechanism that allows customers to get a Golden Nugget branded credit card, if you will, that's rechargeable with funds. And the unique aspect about this particular feature is money can be funded onto this card outside of the gaming process, as well as money that you've won put back onto the gaming card. I believe you're going to get a presentation later today, possibly from a payment provider. One of the most significant challenges in the gaming industry today is being able to accept deposits from credit card companies. There are a series of, I wouldn't say restrictions, but there's general wariness from the credit card companies in being able to fund gaming accounts. So alternate means of getting money into the gaming account is extremely critical, and this prepaid card is one of the most compelling ways of doing that. There's bank transfers, there is transfer from safekeeping. Here's your first touch of a connection between your land-based casino and your online account, where you're actually able to take money out of your land-based account through your host or hostess at the casino and being able to put that right into your iGaming account. We have cashier's check, personal check, as well as credit cards. Withdrawals are very similar, a variety of means of withdrawing money out of the account, how much you have in your balance, how you want to withdraw. We can transfer between wallets. We can look at history. And then I want to touch a little bit more on responsible gaming and limits. So player protection in all sorts of ways is extremely important to us, and I would assume it's important to you as well. We want to protect the player from a game experience by making sure that we have games that are proven, tested, and conform to a certain payout percentage. But equally important is the requirement to be able to allow the player to set responsible gaming limits right at the website. So the technology allows for deposit limits, wager limits, loss limits on poker or casino games, how much you can deposit on a daily or monthly, yearly basis, so that the player can monitor themselves and provide the limits that they feel they're comfortable with in order to prevent problem gambling. These may be set by a customer service operator in conjunction with the player or set at the website directly from this interface here. Equally as important is the ability for a player to completely self-exclude. So if a player feels that they are in danger or they're being counseled to exclude themselves, they may exclude themselves voluntarily for a 1-year period or a 5-year period, which is generally irrevocable unless there's some other sort of intervention. But once a player self-excludes, they are not able to play games again until that period expires. And that interface is directly here on the website. And then, of course, we have the terms and conditions. These are all agreed to as part of the process of enrolling for an account. So overall, the player is educated prior to getting access to the site of all of the capabilities that they have and all the protections put in place for them. And last, before I go back to the presentation, just a little bit on the promotions that are available to the player. So this particular casino, Golden Nugget, has a land-based presence as well in New Jersey. And as I will touch on in a little bit later in the presentation, they see the internet application as a way of generating revenue, but they also see the desire to take the players whenever they can and to drive them back to the land-based casino. So through a series of promotions, tournaments, and things of that nature, they're able to create incentives for the player when they're online to earn certain things and to go back into the casino. So through a variety of promotions, through bonuses, through different types of land-based awards, they build that cross-platform drive. We call it round tripping. Take the player online, back to the casino, from the casino back online. That is one of the greatest benefits of internet gaming for a state that has both land-based and internet as well. So, in the interest of time, what I'm going to do is I am going to go back to the presentation and to spend a bit more time on some of the cross-platform approaches that are in the internet today, as well as coming in the future. So as I was looking up cross-platform strategies, I found this, what I thought was a pretty humorous cartoon here. If only, our little South Park friend here says, if Microsoft and Sony could only make cross-platform gaming possible, I'd be so happy. It's been the goal from many companies over many years to be able to bring this collection of players together in a seamless way. And some of the initiatives that we have ongoing that I'll talk through in the next few minutes try to bring cross-platform to the gaming industry, especially in places where there are land-based casinos as well. So what does cross-platform strategy mean to Bally? The first is that platform means not only land-based, but also PC, internet, or PC, mobile, and tablet, all the devices you see in green around you, and that's very similar to what James had spoken to. But it goes past that. The key fundamentals of cross-platform strategy for us are, one, mirroring the floor content, so having players be able to experience similar content wherever they are, whether they're at home or in the casino. Second, expanding gaming access. Third, bonusing players everywhere. We'll touch on that in a few more minutes. And then enterprise-wide actionable data. When you combine all those together, it provides a very powerful tool for casinos across their entire touch points of their players. So the first is mirroring the floor content. What does this mean for us? So we are an aggregator of content. So Bally has some extremely strong slot content, and through the Shuffle acquisition, some very strong proprietary table game content. But when a player goes to an internet game site, they want to play the same exact games that they have on the land-based floor. So Bally has gone and built relationships with all the companies that you would see in the land-based casino. And through an RGS integration, as James had mentioned, we take their content and we integrate that to our iGaming platform, and we distribute it across all the platforms that we have deployed today. So just some examples of one at the bottom here. At Golden Nugget, you will see Bally content, IGT content, you'll see Amaya content, soon Shuffle Master content. So a player can play their favorite game no matter where they are. Okay, so it's an extremely important aspect to being able to bring players to a common experience across the floor. Second is expanding access of content, right? So 6 months ago or a year ago, I could only play Wild Huskies on a slot machine inside the casino. I'm familiar with it. It's my favorite game. I want to play it. Now I can take it with me on my laptop. I can take it on my tablet, and I can take it on my mobile phone. And what's key here is that the game is identical, with the exception of maybe format, to the game you'd play inside the casino. So it could be the same percentaging, you could have the same play mechanics, the same bonusing, the same types of sounds, the same symbols, etc. It's virtually the same identical game wherever you happen to be. And that doesn't just limit to slots. Table games apply as well. So here's an example of a Mississippi stud game, one of our products. We have that same exact game available on PC, on tablet, as well as on mobile phone. So a player can become familiar with the game in the land-based casino and be able to take it wherever they are and play that same exact gaming experience. So we want to expand access to every piece of content regardless of channel. So the next key aspect of cross-platform strategy is the ability to expand the bonuses that a player has in the land-based casino out to online and vice versa. So today there are systems you see at the bottom that control the gaming experience in the land-based casino. We also have systems like deployed at Golden Nugget in New Jersey that control the gaming on the internet. What Bally has done is we've established a link between the two of them. So what we do is we actually take the iGaming account and the land-based account and we link them electronically so that both platforms know that Jeff Allen's land-based card and Jeff Allen there is the same account as my iGaming account. We've linked the two of them together. And that allows us to do some very unique things. It allows us, where allowed by law, to be able to provide ratings for the player, from online and mobile play. It allows us to give away loyalty points, land-based loyalty points for online and mobile play. And it also allows us to do other unique things like create triggers from online play to give away land-based awards. So an example of one of our core integration initiatives is to be able to create rules for activity online to be able to give away land-based promotions. So an example would be a tournament entry. So you have a tournament entry in the casino, you get that by possibly playing X number of games on a land-based machine. We extend that to allow that same tournament entry to be earned by doing something online. And what does that do? That drives players from their online activity back into the land-based, so we can round-trip monetize them. In some markets where this is allowed, we're experimenting with that today. The next is what we call single view of the player. And so today, land-based casinos can look at their CMS system, and they can view exactly what I played within the walls of the casino. How many games I played, what game I played, when I played it, how much I won, how much I lost. Through the linking of the two systems, the online and the land-based system, into a common business intelligence solution, in this case, we're depicting Bally here, we can now generate a wide variety of data that's actionable by the casino, okay? So for instance, at the bottom you see ratings. So what's depicted there is my rating, my play activity online as well as in the land-based casino. So that the casino now has a better snapshot of what I like to play, where I like to play it, better, more informed offers to me. And then other things we can do would be things like conversion statistics and viewing how well our promotions have been, how effective they've been in order to drive players from online back into the land-based. So you see some things such as conversion, total registrations online, sessions played. This is all resident within the business intelligence solution. So bringing together of data so that you can get a better snapshot of what the player is playing. Sum total of all the cross-platform benefits is that it provides more opportunities for land-based casinos. So some of them that we have been working toward providing ROIs for is that we want to be able to increase what we call the playership of the player wherever they may happen to be. So by being able to tailor the type of content that you offer online and matching inside your casino, we offer a more 360-degree experience to the player. So what they call a rising tide lifts all boats. So we're trying to build that ubiquitous experience 360 degrees for the player. The second is it's a challenge. We are trying to bring all manufacturers together for the common good of the players. Our approach is towards aggregation of content, bringing IGT and Shuffle and Bally and Aristocrat Konami all together. So the benefit here is that a greater cooperation between the suppliers will benefit the brick and mortar casinos as well. Certainly, an online presence increases the content distribution opportunities for the casinos and increases the revenue potential. And by having an online presence, you're building brand awareness and loyalty, as well as getting players used to game content before they come into your casino. Table games is a good example, being able to get people to learn and understand table games in a non-threatening environment. Those are just some of the synergies between online play as well as brick and mortar casinos. Finally, a couple of items that I might leave with you as challenges that we've thought of as we have started to deploy a cross-platform strategy for online. And I'll just go touch on these very, very briefly. These were probably topics that you're going to think about as you start to formulate your own registration or your own regulations, excuse me. So the first is a common wallet and transfer of funds. Today in New Jersey, we have a separate wallet for your land-based casino and for your online. And a concept that many casinos have come to us with is, how can I use exactly the same wallet for both land and online? And do you want to allow that approach? what are the risks inherent with that, but I think that's going to be something that you'll be challenged with as you start to legalize internet gaming along with your land-based. The second is the mobile device is becoming so common in the way we do our everyday life that a mobile wallet is going to be coming soon, right? So the ability to take your wallet and to tap on a game or to transfer a code right at the machine or online is coming, and you'll be challenged with that. That access to funds is extremely important for just obviously the ability to game. The third is throughout the United States there are a variety of models for geofencing. New Jersey allows gaming both on mobile and internet anywhere within the state. Nevada has chosen poker anywhere within the boundaries of the state, but on mobile you have to be within the walls of the property. Several other states allow wagering, but you got to be within the walls of the casino or on a reservation. So the ability to wade through what your geolocation strategy is going to be extremely, extremely important for you. And you're going to be hearing from some of the geolocation partners in the industry about that as well. Enhanced validation and protection of players. There's a fine line between how much information you want from the player compared to registration. Honestly, I'm hesitant to give my social security number to anyone, right? But in New Jersey, if I want to wager, I have to do that. So being able to navigate how much you want to collect from a player and require is going to be a challenge that you'll have to overcome, and you'll find there's sensitivities from various people there. Unified player communication. With the advent of the mobile phone platform and the internet, your casinos now are able to send messages as well as offers to players across all platforms. And you're going to want to understand and carefully monitor what types of offers and how you communicate that to players. I think it's safe to say on the online technology front, the technology can outpace what you're probably going to want to do from a regulatory perspective. There's a lot more that can be done than you may feel comfortable with. And so figuring out what portion of that technology you want to use is going to be extremely critical. And then, of course, I know you are considering who you grant licenses to, whether it be only to pure online or whether it's to land-based. The United States is primarily land-based. And so there's, as we had mentioned before, there's lots of advantages to coupling online with a land-based presence. So just some food for thought going forward. So with that, are there any questions that I may answer for you?
I might have missed it, but in allowing the online self-exclusion, does the self-exclusion on the game mirror what a state would offer in terms of self-exclusion terms and periods of time, et cetera?
It certainly can. It certainly can. The one thing I will also mention is that in some instances we actually check upon registration land-based self-exclusion databases to make sure that certain players that have been prohibited from gaming are prevented from registration. So on registration, we'll actually do a check of that electronic database in some cases if required.
And on that note, you mentioned 7 casinos in New Jersey. Would a person have to go self-exclude from each one of the 7, or can they do it once for all 7?
So I will ask Eric to assist me there. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that we are integrated to the self-exclusion database in New Jersey.
The process in New Jersey is that the Division of Gaming Enforcement publishes a list of self-excluded people. It's a confidential list of the casino partners in the casino industry. We also have a list of bad actors also prohibited from gambling within the casino and the internet. In New Jersey, you can self-exclude from the internet only and not land-based. But if you exclude from land-based, you're excluded from both internet and land-based. The process is you have
Could I ask one more, Jim? What is the, is there a difference in the economic model between the customer you service online and the customer that's serviced in, well, obviously there is, but what are the economic models between you're servicing a customer online and you're servicing a customer in the casino?
From Bally's perspective? So in the land-based casino, there's a couple of different models. There is on the slot machine, there's a game sale, and there's a participation game as well.
A share of revenue.
A share of revenue, correct. Online, it's primarily a share of revenue is the common model. So when IGT gives content or Aristocrat gives content, there's a relationship between those content providers and the casino for a percentage of revenue, as well as Bally from a platform side and from a content side.
And that's if you're offering in collaboration with a bricks and mortar casino.
Correct, and that's the only way currently that is being offered.
That's in New Jersey.
Correct. It's only through a land-based casino.
Right. But from your standpoint, presumably it would be better if it was offered without the casino.
We have chosen not to be a business-to-consumer company. So we are pure business-to-business. We are a technology provider only. We are not providing gaming directly to players. It's exclusively through licensed land-based casinos, or if there is a jurisdiction, a licensed operator of gaming. So we are purely business-to-business at this point. So there's not even a possibility that we would go directly to the player through that.
Is that true of everybody in that business?
I wouldn't necessarily say everybody, but it's definitely IGT's position as well, from real money wagering.
For real money wagering, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Double Down is direct to consumer. So,
Okay. Thanks.
thank you.
Very
Thank you
interesting.
very much.
Well, thank you, Jeffrey, and thank you again, James. That's a good overview of what this is all about, and it's the number of moving pieces is fascinating, and it's not limited now to this area. I know of one major university that's using some of this as part of its admissions process, and of course we hear when we think about the profiles that Jeffrey talked about, we hear about Amazon and some of the things that they're doing in order to anticipate what customers will need and when they'll need it. But we do have a good overview now of what this is, and on both the social side and the for pay side and how it works. So now we want to spend a few minutes talking about what people and jurisdictions are doing with it. First, sort of a national and world perspective, and then some of the parameters that are here in Massachusetts. For the national perspective, the America's Managing Director of Gambling Compliance, the publication that is a daily supplier of an enormous amount of useful information, is James Kilsby. He is probably the premier chronicler of online gaming here and across the globe, and we're fortunate enough to have him with us today to give us sort of a synopsis of what's going on throughout the country and a snapshot of what's going on elsewhere.
Thank you for the very kind introduction. I'll just have a brief presentation to give you a sense of which states are looking at this area, which have legalized already, and then try and put that in some global context of jurisdictions that have gone before. Just give me a moment to load the presentation. Okay, so as I mentioned, the purpose of my presentation is really just to update the Commission on, as Massachusetts addresses this issue in its early stages of doing so, which states would it potentially be looking to follow, and where does this discussion fit in within the context of a nationwide and even international debates about some of the key policy issues in this area. What we'll see from this slide, where we stand today, internet gaming, by that I mean online casino games or poker, is now legal in 3 states, which is Nevada, New Jersey, and Delaware. There have been bills or proposals probably likely to be considered in perhaps 8 to 10 other states, and also before Congress this year. And we also have 3 state lotteries that are participating in online gaming through either offering their traditional lottery tickets for sale on the internet, or keynote or instant type games being offered to their customers online. I think it was Senator Rosenberg earlier mentioned that this is a new frontier for the gaming industry, and I thought it was a good point to consider why are we now approaching this frontier now, and why is this an issue that seems to have been gathering far more momentum in perhaps the last 4 years than it had previously. And among the many reasons why I think that we're now discussing this issue, I'll probably like to highlight 4. Firstly, I'd suggest that there's now an increased interest in iGaming as an opportunity among the industry itself, and that's both the casino operators and the suppliers, the likes of IGT and Bally. I think in the last perhaps 4 to 5 years, those domestic companies are starting to embrace this as more of an opportunity than perhaps a threat to their businesses. Secondly, seen an increasing comfort that this activity can be regulated and that on the part of the well-established gaming authorities in Nevada and New Jersey especially. But thirdly, and it's important to note that one of the reasons why we're now seeing activity in this area is because it's become increasingly apparent and that this is an activity that states can pursue and can look to regulate themselves under federal law. And I'm absolutely not qualified to give a overview of all the federal laws as they potentially apply to online gaming, but there's certainly 2 that the Commission may wish to consider and look in greater depth. Firstly, there you'll see the 2006 Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act, which was passed by Congress to prohibit deposits made to unlawful internet gambling websites. So it's effectively a ban on the processing of payments for illegal internet gaming. But that act didn't offer an exact precise definition of what unlawful internet gambling was, and actually it appeared to open the door for lawful internet gambling, and specifically said that that term, unlawful internet gambling, does not apply to transactions that are initiated and received or otherwise made exclusively within a single state, subject to those states being legalized and regulated. So that kind of opened the door for states to consider about exploiting that provision within the federal law. But another key barrier that has been removed in recent years is 1961 Wire Act. And under the previous administration, the US Department of Justice had taken the stance that this 1961 law prohibited all forms of internet gambling. When in December of 2011, just before Christmas, the Department of Justice's Office of Legal Counsel published a memorandum reversing that traditional opinion and stating that actually the department's view is that the Wire Act only prohibits sports betting online. So really that cleared up one legal question mark in this area about what states could do, and combined with the carve-out from the 2006 Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act, that created a federal legal environment that we are now seeing states like Nevada, New Jersey, and Delaware move into. That would bring me on to the 4th point, really, as to why we're seeing increasing activity. And I think, again, that's an area of federal law and federal legislation. I think that states are seeing this as the potential for Congress to act again in this area. Perhaps the early adopters of internet gaming would be favored under any federal legislation that does come down. Perhaps even those that don't act to regulate in this area may even lose that opportunity in future if Congress does decide to change either of these two laws or pass a new one again. So that's why we're here, and this is a map really to show the state of play as of the end of 2013. We have the 3 states there, and just see Delaware and New Jersey together, and Nevada that have legalized iGaming, and a total of 9 states last year that either considered formal legislation in this area or legislative proposals and had discussions around this activity. We could shade the map another way and shade in green Illinois, Georgia, and Minnesota, which are the 3 states that, via their lotteries, participating in some form of online gambling with more traditional lottery products than the type we've just seen demonstrated. But as with the land-based gaming market across the country, there doesn't seem to be a uniform expansion of internet gaming, even with just the 3 states that have adopted it so far, in the way that Rhode Island and New Hampshire and Connecticut and Massachusetts don't have exactly the same system in place, the same structure. That seems to be a pattern emerging where states are taking the same approach and regulating online gaming according to their own policy objectives. To illustrate that, Nevada is regulated by Gaming Control Board and Gaming Commission, and only allows licenses to be obtained by the large resort-style casinos. And the only type of games that can be offered by those interactive gaming licensees is poker only. So none of the casino-style games or slots that we've seen. The tax rate in Nevada is 6.75%, which is exactly the same tax rate that is paid by the land-based casinos. New Jersey, similar in the sense that it's regulated again by the gaming agencies, the DGE and the Casino Control Commission. Again, similar in that only the land-based casino resorts in Atlantic City can obtain the licenses to operate internet gaming. But as well as being able to offer poker, they can offer, the license holders can offer all types of casino games. And the tax rate is, effective tax rate is about 17.5%, which is almost double the tax rate that is applied to the land-based operations in New Jersey. Thirdly, Delaware is a different model altogether, where the state lottery has procured one online gaming platform that it controls, oversees, and operates itself. But it offers that on a white label basis to the 3 racetrack casinos in Delaware. So there's one platform, one back end to it, but the 3 casinos have their own brands on 3 separate websites that use that platform, and they market that to their customers and share in the revenue on the same basis that they do land-based gaming. So you see there really the land-based gaming regulatory models in Nevada, New Jersey, and Delaware are being brought online, and they clearly see where the regimes are coming from. One other point of note that's certainly worth mentioning, in a very recent development, is that Delaware and Nevada have agreed to pool their poker players via a multi-state agreement, which basically means that the poker players in Delaware and the poker players in Nevada will be able to compete against each other via one platform. The necessity for this should may become apparent, but that's an early sign of collaboration between states in this area, and then perhaps moving towards what we've seen in the lottery industry with Mega Millions and Powerball, where states work together to create games and products that are of greater consumer interest than they would be than the individual games that they operate themselves. Just to illustrate again some of the diversity of regulatory models that we're seeing proposed either last year or carried on into this year. so I guess there's about a dozen different states or proposals that are out there. Some proposing different games, different oversight and different operators, and then different tax rates. I guess to highlight just a couple of those, Massachusetts, as I'm sure you're very much aware, there are two bills that have been introduced in the state Senate. One to authorize the Massachusetts lottery to offer games online, and another to offer licenses for iGaming to the prospective licensees that will be under the Gaming Commission's authority. California is probably a state that I expect to hear more about as this year goes on. There's two bills to allow online poker only that are pending in the legislature there. Pennsylvania, an official study that the legislature has requested is being conducted, and I believe should be presented before May, but that will include a study of the potential for online gaming in Pennsylvania, which should give some sense of the appetite and a context for a discussion of online gaming in Pennsylvania. I guess there's certainly worth noting the two federal bills that are pending in the House of Representatives, one of which would authorize poker games only, and one poker, casino, and others. But what we're really talking about there, rather than there being a nationwide scheme regulated directly by the federal government, there would be new agencies created in the federal government that would set the standards for state regulators to be qualified to issue licenses and regulate this activity on an interstate basis. As I say, one of the bills would create that scheme solely for poker, and the other for other games. And there's a lot of different variables and fairly long pieces of legislation, but certainly that's the framework that's been under consideration in Congress is that state agencies would play a role in this area, but they would have to have shown that they're qualified to do so. So we're seeing certainly some momentum pick up in this area since 2010 and 2011, which I guess is the two things there. 2010, I'd have thought that was when federal legislation really came into view as a possibility, and 2011, when the Justice Department position on the Wire Act came out, we're seeing this clearly pick up with both the number of states that are considering bills in this area and the states that are considering allowing interstate play as part of that system. How fast and how much this is going to pick up is really unclear. I'm sure we'll see much more legislation considered in this area, but I'm conscious of Senator Rosenberg describing Massachusetts' expanded gaming debate as going on for decade after decade. So there's certainly a sense of political and legislative uncertainty within here in terms of how many states and how quickly they will get into this market. Certainly a lot of attention in the next few months is being paid to New Jersey in particular, and that's certainly with respect to Nevada and Delaware, but I think New Jersey is seen as a largest of those three states. The complete range of products, poker and casino, and I think that the industry and all stakeholders in there are watching New Jersey very closely to assess not just whether the regulation is working effectively, and this is an activity that can be regulated, but also how is it functioning from an economic perspective, both in terms of the revenue that it's generating, and also how is this? Is there any impact of cannibalization on the Atlantic City casinos? Certainly, New Jersey is a very informative case study for the next few months, and I think the states that are considering legislation are certainly aware of that. So quickly, this is just a list, very non-exhaustive list of some of the key policy questions that any state really would be looking to consider in this area. State or federal oversight is a big one. Traditionally, gambling regulation has been left to the states. But the question is, as this involves the internet, does that make it an inherently interstate activity? But certainly at the moment, it's the states that are taking the lead in regulation and moving this forward. If a state is going to regulate or authorize this, there's the question of who should operate onto internet gaming within that jurisdiction and who should regulate it. Nevada and New Jersey have gone the route of having their casinos operate it with oversight by the gaming agencies, whereas Delaware, which there's constitutional reasons for this, I believe, but Delaware, it's the lottery that is being most active. And if that's perhaps not a straight choice between one or the other, is there a way that you can have the lottery and land-based gaming companies participate in this area, and how does that oversight work? The type of games would be another one. New Jersey, Delaware, casino and all games, but Nevada and what's being considered in California is poker only. And then if you're going to allow all casino games, or if you're going to allow casino-style games, is there a limit to place on the type of games that can be considered there? I think actually one of the bills in Massachusetts would not allow games that appeared like slot machine games, and that's something that Spain and Italy and Europe have done as well. A big word and a big concept to bear in mind, and the fourth point there is liquidity, which is particularly important for poker. And this is the idea that the irony really of regulating of internet gaming versus land-based gaming is that the borders around which you're regulating online gaming seem to be more defined actually than they are with land-based gaming. Whereas if there's a casino that's on the border of New Hampshire and Massachusetts, but within Massachusetts jurisdiction, the number of players that can be drawn to that facility is limited purely by the travel time that it takes to get them desire, but the desire of the players to do so. Whereas for internet gaming, if you're regulating it on a state basis, you are confined to doing that in all players and transactions within your state. So the greater pool of players that are available due to state population is really determines the profitability of that market and the viability of that market, more so in some respects than the land-based side. And that kind of strength of player and depth of population is particularly important for poker, because poker operators or poker players expect to have a large range of games available, and they're competing against other poker players. So the more players that you can have on a poker operation, the more attractive it is, and to have a poker regime with a small number of players is a tricky one to do so, and a tricky one for the operators to operate that in a profitable way. Next point's around geolocation and ID verification and payment processing were touched on in the previous panel, but and particularly some of the hesitation at this point of credit card companies, or the banks that issue credit cards, to allow their cards to be used in internet gaming. I think when you combine the challenge of regulating in a confined jurisdiction with liquidity, with the geolocation and ID verification controls that are required, plus the difficulty around payments, that really leads you to a somewhat open question around the revenue potential and the profitability of markets on a state-by-state basis. Again, that's, I think, one of the reasons why people are looking so closely at New Jersey. Two final ones are big ones, and I won't go into, but certainly one to go in mind is the suitability standards you might require of new suppliers that will be servicing the online gaming industry. I believe the Commission is just starting the process now of licensing game suppliers and technology providers for the land-based casinos. With internet gaming, you may have, whoever the licensees are, they may look to tap the expertise of companies that formerly serviced the US market when it wasn't expressly regulated. So that raises questions about, what should be the standards that are applied to that, and should this be an area that the regulators or commission has authority to decide for itself, or do you legislate around that area? So lots of questions that really don't have an immediate answer, but certainly hopefully gives some context to watch as this area is developing in real time in the 3 states that have allowed it. And if we skip to some of the international jurisdictions, you probably see that some of the same challenges have arisen there. I'll stick with Canada and Europe to frame what's going on in the States in an international context. Canada, there are now 3, soon to be 4, provincial lottery corporations that are operating online casino and poker games. You'll notice there that it's the lottery of the Canadian provinces that is directly operating in that area. They've done, I guess, similar to Delaware in that it's the agency of the government that's procuring the technology themselves and then deploying it. That's not so much a policy choice. There's a limit around the Canadian federal law, the criminal code, that requires provinces to operate gaming directly. But that's certainly another example of lottery agencies being very active in internet gaming. And Europe is a very complex and fast-changing story in and of itself. But essentially what we're seeing is the vast majority now of European Union countries authorizing and regulating online gaming. Either they've done that already or they're in the process of doing so. That would include, licensing regimes are already in place now in the UK, Italy, France, Spain, and Denmark, and there are others in Eastern Europe, and countries including Germany, the Netherlands, and Portugal, and again others in Eastern Europe that are actively undergoing reforms to allow and license online gaming for the first time. So that's on the one hand, we have a system of licensing regimes. There's a few countries that are offering online gaming directly through state monopolies, often lottery companies, and that would be Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Austria are examples of those. Interesting to note, really, and this is where the lessons of Europe I'd exercise some caution in looking at the impact of online gaming in certain of these countries, because they're doing a rather different thing in many cases than what is being talked about in the States, where we're really talking about bringing existing land-based gaming, land-based casinos online. The only country that's really done that model, to my knowledge, is Belgium, which is requiring a land-based license in order to move online. And essentially Europe is a similar thing. There's the different games available in different jurisdictions, different tax rates, and some of the challenges. There's a big one around conformity with European law, which has driven the debate that certainly won't exist here. The challenges would include how to have a competitive enough offer to beat unlicensed providers, and how to best harness liquidity and create pools of players that are wider than just one country. And there is no defined solution that you can look to in Europe as of yet that would give the answer to that. But as I say, it's a fast-moving and fast-changing industry, so plenty to watch out for. I'll leave it there, but I'm certainly very happy to answer any questions that you have.
I had one question. James, you mentioned the 2 bills in Congress, but I don't believe you mentioned the Wire Act fix being drafted. Does that have to do with sports betting? Or?
No, so this is, there's nothing that's been introduced, but there's likely to be legislation this year. There's one senator from South Carolina who's already stated that he's drafting this, but there's likely to be legislation considered to undo the Justice Department's opinion on the Wire Act, which would essentially mean that restriction applied to all forms of internet gambling and not just sports betting. So I think that's a debate that's probably going to happen. But as to what, whether how that's going to work in terms of legally resetting the law, and then B, how that's going to play out in Congress and whether it has a prospects of passing it's almost impossible to say.
Thanks.
James, do you sense any hesitation from some states that they'll wait and see if there's any action on the federal level?
Perhaps not on the federal level and wait and see there. I think that is the momentum feels in this with the states really. I think if there is to censor, there is some hesitation to move forward. My feeling is that it would be the kind of paradox of New Jersey, especially moving forward. That on the one hand, that's going to can prove the case from a regulatory perspective that this is something absolutely that states have the ability to effectively control. But on the other hand, I guess it may have a certain cause the momentum slightly, because now states can have a very real example that they can look to, of revenue perspective and otherwise. So there could be a sense that some states are, now that there are 3 markets live, looking to draw conclusions from those early adopters and apply them. And for all 3 of them, it's early days. So perhaps there's a sense of wait and see for a few months or to be able to draw those conclusions.
Thank you.
All right, James. That's a great snapshot of what's going on here and a little bit about Europe. Let me just, though, before I turn to the next one, take the flip side of Commissioner Stebbins' question. Have you seen any suggestion anywhere, or hints anywhere, that states are perking up interest in trying to get in ahead of whatever federal legislation may come, on the theory that if they're established, the federal legislation will have to take account of what's already there and what's already been licensed?
Well, I'm not sure that. I don't know that that's necessarily been so much part of the debate in actually in terms of what states have done in their processes, but it's certainly something that I think that advocates in this area have. I know they've discussed, and there was proponents of wanting the gaming industry to embrace internet gambling have really seen the opening of the door with the Wire Act as an opportunity for states to move forward. And I guess the reverse of that is, if the door is open, perhaps someone would come along one day and close it. But I think that the kind of picking up of the momentum is more that that opportunity arriving rather than it potentially disappearing.
Okay, thank you. Well, whatever the case in the future, it's clear that we can't do it here now. And to tell us why, Patrick Hanley is the chief of the Gaming Enforcement Division of the Massachusetts Attorney General's Office. He's an experienced law enforcement officer, has had a number of law enforcement positions. He's one of our partners in making this thing work, making sure it works with integrity. And he's going to outline for us now, in broad terms at least, what the Massachusetts framework is and is not.
Good morning. Thank you for the introduction. I'm fortunate enough to be the last speaker before the break, so I hope everybody's barely awake and I say something interesting. So we're here under the impression or the assumption that much of what we're talking about is in fact illegal in Massachusetts. there isn't a law in Massachusetts that says you can't gamble on the internet. But there's a whole bunch of other laws that were generated largely before there were even computers, that those overlapping laws make it clear that you can't gamble on the internet under the existing laws. In my experience, prior to this job largely, we have prosecuted gambling cases where folks were what's called organizing and promoting gambling organizations. And often what would happen would be that and that's under General Law 271-16A, generally individuals would place bets on the internet. There'd be a bookie who was physically here in Massachusetts. The online, the internet part would be offshore somewhere. But if you won, your bookie would come meet you, or an agent for that bookie would come meet you and pay. If you owed, that bookie would probably find you, and you'd have to pay them. In Massachusetts, I mentioned cases. United States versus Todd Lyons and Daniel Aramian is a recent First Circuit case. It was a Massachusetts wiretap, but it explains how historically internet gambling has been prosecuted in Massachusetts. I also prosecuted a case that pled against a guy named Joseph Gialinella and one of his agents, Gerald Sorrow, which basically worked the same way. But the framework in Massachusetts for that deals with gambling, criminalizing gambling, is basically found in two places under 23K, Section 37, which outlaws operating any game or gaming device as defined in the beginning of that chapter. And a game or gaming device is defined pretty broadly to include, I think, a game operated via the internet, unless it's authorized by the Gaming Commission. But more than that, under general laws, under Chapter 271, which is where most of the historic gambling crimes can be found, and they are historic or almost prehistoric in the way that they're written. But these laws make it, as I said, not illegal to gamble on the internet. It doesn't say that, but it says it's illegal to offer gambling devices for sale, which arguably would include software. Under, for example, 271, Section 7, it makes it illegal to, aside from sports bets, but for non-sports bets, any type of game of chance, which it is defined as a lottery, you can't place any bets, those types of bets. Under Chapter 271, Sections 9 and 11, it outlaws both the sale and the advertising of any out-of-state lottery tickets. I know that there's been discussion nationally about different states wanting to offer the sale of lottery tickets from their state and another state in order to boost business. You can't do that here in Massachusetts. Again, as I mentioned, Chapter 271, 16A, that's our big felony organizing and promoting statute. It's a 15-year felony if you violate this. And it basically says that if you have 4 or more employees, 4 or more people that are functioning as part of an operation to offer any type of bet, that is illegal in Massachusetts. So I imagine that almost any internet gambling company has at least 4 employees. So it's under that statute that is sort of the big deterrent to doing it here in the Commonwealth. 271, Section 17 outlaws keeping a place for registering bets. So arguably, if there were a kiosk where you could go and place bets via the internet at a kiosk, that would be illegal as well. Section 17A says you can't use a phone for registering any kind of bet. It doesn't actually say anything about the internet, but arguably using a phone, the internet uses a phone line in most cases, that arguably would be illegal as well. You can't possess records relating to gambling under Section 20. You can't send or receive any information about gambling, so an email saying, hey, you've won probably illegal under Section 22. You can't place bets on horses or illegal horse races in Massachusetts unless, of course, it's authorized horse racing. In the most absolute law in Massachusetts on betting, you can't bet on boxing in Massachusetts in any way, shape, or form. So the reason I just offer this, and I have this cheat sheet here on what the statutes are. It's, like I said, there's no place that it says you can't gamble on the internet in Massachusetts. But there's a whole bunch of other laws that sort of blanket the territory, and to the extent that the Commonwealth would choose to make it legal in some circumstances, there'd have to be a carve-out, as there is for brick and mortar businesses under Chapter 23K. All of these 271 statutes that I mentioned all have carve-outs, except where authorized under 23K by the Gaming Commission. That's it. Any questions? Thank you.
There aren't many rough edges there. So I think what we'll do now, with thanks to the panel for these thoughtful and stimulating discussions, is take a break from this gathering to discuss illegal activity, and we will resume. We will resume in 15 minutes, and Executive Director Day will lead the next two segments of the program. 15-minute break, and then we'll resume.
If I get everybody to take your seats, I know our next panel, we're going to be bumping right up against the time frame that we've got available.
Interested in time, but we're now assuming the outside date. So being neighbors to us, whether it's arbitration or not.
I'd like to make just a couple quick informational remarks, at least for our presenters and our panelists and our staff. We will be providing lunch for you just next door where you were this morning. We're going to take that lunch break at 12:30 according to our agenda. I'd also like to acknowledge Janice Riley and Mary Ann Dooley, who have been the two that have been actually organizing this. Jim and I are just the good-looking guys providing the entertainment. Thanks, Janice and Mary Ann. We appreciate your help and work. Our next panel is going to be a little discussion about the risk to internet gaming, and in particular money laundering, problem gambling, and verification. At least it's been my experience that the idea of this topic, these are subjects that almost any discussion of internet gaming and whether or not you're going to have internet gaming in a jurisdiction usually end up in these subjects somewhere along the line. And I think as we even opened up our discussions this morning, our previous speakers have already touched on some of those issues. The idea of this topic to finish this morning is that time permits, we'll check for questions after each speaker is done, but we'll try to move right on through their presentation, and depending on how quick we're able to get through it, we're going to allow them about 20 minutes to summarize each one of the topics. And I'd like to talk briefly, our first speaker will be Tim Richards. Tim is right to my right. Tim is the General Manager and Senior Vice President of Global Cash. Tim joined Global Cash in 2011 as the Senior Vice President for Product Development, and in February of 2013, he was named to the GM and Senior Vice President of the new Interactive Solutions Division with the goal of establishing Global Access's market leadership position into the iGaming space. So prior to Global Gaming Access, Mr. Richards worked to product innovation related executive positions for Interblock, IGT, Progressive Gaming, and Gaming Systems. So the topic we've asked Tim to address for us this morning is about money laundering and age verification. And with that, Tim, it's all yours. Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
So I think some of you may have heard of Global Cash, but just to give you a quick background on the company, is we provide cash access services, ATM services, to the majority of the gaming markets. We're very much focused on the casino market in the U.S. We have about 70-75% of the casinos. We process about $20 billion each year in transactions for casinos. And we also operate about 15 or 18 check cashing booths which allows us basically to provide check cashing, cash access services for those casinos of which have asked us to put those booths in, basically run that part of the cage for them. And for that, as a company, we have to follow a lot of these same AML rules, and it's something that we not only build into our products, but it's something we have to practice on an operational basis each day. So I spent some good amount of time with our product compliance product compliance folks in that department, and gather some information through them, and hopefully we can make this informative. But feel free to follow up with any questions if I missed anything. But please understand this is based on our practical experience, and of course there's a lot of legal ramifications and probably a lot more questions that will need to be answered than what could probably be answered in 20 minutes. So the first question is what is AML or what is money laundering? So AML, by the way, I'll probably throw that out there, just means anti-money laundering. But I went out and I found two definitions on the internet, and the first one that came up was basically it's the concealing of a source of illegally gotten money. That was from WordNet. I'm not sure I ever used that site before, but I thought it was interesting. So I'm a little bit warped, and I thought, well, I'll go to Urban Dictionary and see what Urban Dictionary has to say. That'll probably be kind of funny. And it was actually a really good definition. It was probably the best one I had come up with. So basically the process of hiding the source of illegal income by processing it through a large turnover entity who takes a premium from it and then receiving the income from that entity to avoid suspicion. And I'm sorry, it's a little hard to read up here if I missed that. But it's basically it's what it is. It's, hey, I've gotten some illegal money. How do I run it through a few sources and make it appear to be legal and legitimate? And generally there's a VIG I'm going to have to pay in order to make that happen. I wanted to just throw a few examples out there. I think generally speaking in the news we hear of money laundering, we hear of this sort of thing. And it happens, in the past it's happened through banks. And I apologize if you can't see that in the back, but these 7 dots basically represent fines over the past few years for some of the major banks. I think the first big dot is $1.92 billion was the fine that HSBC paid for their actions, mainly in Latin America, where they were kindly taking cash in the banks and allowing it to be laundered through the banks and through their banks. As you can see, there's several others. And I wanted to throw this up there because I think it is something that FinCEN and the U.S. takes very seriously, especially within the banks. I'm not sure from a gaming perspective that we've ever reached these levels of fines, but it's something the banks are keenly aware of. And of course, all this ties together, and it generally prompts a lot of questions from the banks, and why we've had issues with payment processing, if you will. I know it was mentioned earlier, why we've had issues with payment processing in the iGaming and internet lottery space. Generally speaking, the banks are very concerned about iGaming. And oftentimes they cite the reason they won't process for iGaming is as a reputational risk. As opposed to other things banks have done, I'm not quite sure it's that great of a risk. But today in iGaming, there's really just one processor and one bank that will process for iGaming in the US. And so it is a bit of a concern. So money laundering in the iGaming space, and generally speaking, money laundering in the iGaming space has been related to accusations related to essentially offshore sites allowing iGaming in the U.S. And maybe not a great example, but I think it's sort of, you know, if you think about the reason the mob or the mafia always gets arrested, it's usually tax evasion. It's not the crimes they really committed. And I think that this ends up being a way that the feds have been able to go after illegal offshore gaming. Is basically they're essentially money laundering. They're taking money under the false pretenses of using errant or wrong category codes through processing. They're posing it as different transactions. And generally speaking, that's where money laundering has been enforced, if you will, in the iGaming space, because there hasn't really been any legal iGaming. You've probably heard there's certainly been a few money laundering and reporting fines that have been issued to some of the land-based properties in the U.S. But from an iGaming perspective, that's tended to be the reasoning is basically not using proper category codes for payments, accepting funds through e-wallets, not using the codes, and then moving those funds to the gaming sites. So there's been a few major fines in that area. off the top of my head, I know one of them was upwards of $160 million that one company paid. So where's money laundering found, and how does this happen? And generally speaking, money laundering is going to be much more prevalent in unregulated gaming and illegal internet gaming. The reason being is there's a bit of internationality, if you will, to the funds flow, that funds can flow between countries a little bit easier when you're working between unregulated markets. Often there's very little KYC or know your customer type verification that we would consider here. There's potentially anonymous play. There's markets with no taxes on high wins, so certainly it makes more sense to play in those markets. You're able to play very high percentage games, games like Baccarat, or maybe playing a craps game with a pass line and taking all the odds, or playing blackjack, maybe some advantage play there or basic strategy. You can get the percentages to those games down to, call it less than 2%, if not less than 1% on turnover. That's a pretty effective way to launder money. With GCA, we process for a few of the lotteries, North Carolina and Minnesota, for internet purchases. And laundering always comes up from a lottery perspective. And I don't think I'm telling any secrets, but lotteries hold about 50% of funds. So if you're going to launder money, I don't think buying lottery tickets and hoping you win Powerball is probably the right way to go. There's certainly more effective ways. And we haven't, certainly it's something we track and we monitor for suspicious activity in that space. But there's limits on daily purchases of, I think it's maybe $50 and deposits of $350 or $500 depending on the state. So you just can see it's going to be tough to really monitor to manage AML, or to actually want to launder money in that space. And even with the processes that we've put in place, if you deposit funds for wagering, you have to wager those funds. You can't withdraw those funds until you win, unless, of course, it's a refund or you've made a mistake. Certainly you can call up and ask for a refund. So there's some ways that money laundering has been combated in that space, and I don't see the lottery space as being an effective way to launder any money, but certainly there are some games that could be attractive. There's also no physical goods involved. There's higher stake games in some markets, and so it makes it attractive to money launderers, especially in unregulated markets. Oops. So some examples of money laundering are, maybe I go and buy a bunch of prepaid cards, fund an anonymous account, and then withdraw those funds. Maybe I fund with some large deposits. Maybe I make a few small wagers, I play a little bit, and then I withdraw those funds. Maybe I open up several accounts, deposit withdrawal amounts that are below the AML tracking limits. So generally speaking, when fraudsters hit you, they're going to try smaller transactions. We see this, for instance, we have a check cashing business. We'll see guys that maybe will cash $50, $100 checks, and they'll do that 3 or 4 times. Once they gain your trust, or once they begin to learn your limits, they either begin to play just under those limits, or they hit you really big for fraud. So generally they're testing you, and you need to look for that. And I can tell you, and we'll see from a check cashing perspective, guys that might do $4 transactions for an ACH online. They see that they can do it, and then they try and hit us with a $500 transaction. So it's just something you have to be aware of, and you can spot that type of activity if you're actively monitoring it. Certainly, you don't want to allow any peer-to-peer transfers between accounts. That's generally almost against every regulation of any state that's looked at this. You can attempt to withdraw funds to an account other than where your funds were deposited from. And what that means is I could put in, I can deposit funds from my checking account and try and withdraw them to Rick's checking account or to a different checking account, and that's how I can move the funds around. So generally speaking, you want to send it back to a known account, a vetted account, or to the same account. There's a thing called chip dumping. I decided to jump online and play poker. Maybe I have multiple accounts. Maybe I'm in collusion with somebody, and I magically go all in every single time and lose all my money to my partner, who then wins. Generally speaking, many of the poker systems, and I'm sure these guys can tell you better, have ways to try and vet that and look for chip dumping. But that certainly could be a common practice. And of course, the use of digital currencies. Bitcoin, these kinds of things are you just don't want to bring them in. I mean, obviously, I don't think anybody would seriously consider that today, but I think that they just need to mature before they even become considered valued payments methods. So some signs of potential suspicious activity: patrons conducting transactions, as I mentioned, multiple transactions in a short period of time, basically allowing people to register multiple accounts, which can be stopped through KYC processes using proper KYC companies, monitoring for smaller transactions, and then the larger transactions hitting some thresholds. Touched on most of this. So is there a strong risk of AML and iGaming? And I certainly take the opinion, I don't think that there's a huge risk in AML for money laundering and iGaming. I think that there's a lot of safeguards. There's a lot of vetting of the accounts. There's just a ton that we do in the gaming space to try and deter this. And I think that unlike land-based, everything is monitored through an account. It's generally to a registered account, somebody who you've KYC'd. It just doesn't seem likely that it's a great place for people to money launder, especially in regulated markets. So what are some of the responsibilities of an operator? Most operators, as in New Jersey and Nevada, are going to have land-based AML programs already in place. Look at those programs, expand them, make sure that they cover this business segment, work with the businesses. I think from a compliance standpoint, you want to work hand in hand with the business, hand in hand with what the regulators want to see, to ensure that you have a policy which matches your business needs, not just putting a policy in place which could hinder your business or not be what your business wants. It may even be bigger than what your business wants. You need to identify what type of what your role is in the process. Are you, from stored value perspective, how you're holding the funds? Are you responsible for this? Is your payment provider, your wallet provider? Where do you fall in that list? Basically, you want to make sure you obviously are putting your transaction monitoring and looking at your thresholds. It's something you need to do on a daily basis, looking for suspicious activity. Sorry. You want to ensure that your technology is capturing this. You're going to have a ton of transactions. How are you analyzing it? What analytics are you doing? Are you using some intelligence to try and identify this? Is it something you're doing on spreadsheets? How are you bringing it together with your land-based program? Are you required to combine all of your businesses into one AML program and look that way across your businesses? There's a lot of questions that need to be answered beyond just what you're doing in iGaming. Obviously, it's out there by FinCEN, and certainly able to go find a ton of information online, a ton of good consultants, and can help you come in and set this program up. I did mention there at the end, you want to make sure it's easily auditable. I think that as a company, we're audited probably by 4 or 5 banks. We're audited by Visa, MasterCard. We're audited for each of our money transmitter licenses, check cashing licenses. We probably have the potential to be audited. We have outside AML auditors that come in, probably upwards of 50 times a year. They don't always audit you every year. So you want to make sure that your data is easy to get at and it's easy to be presented to the auditors. And of course, we're in a different situation than a single site would be in. We're operating in, we have, 36 money transmitter licenses, and we're operating in different countries. And so it's something that when they come in, you certainly want to make sure that you can easily get at that information. Auditing is a huge expense and time. This process just sort of walks through the AML requirements, but basically you're going to conduct your KYC. Initially, you're going to do proper age verification. You want to do an OFAC check. You want to look at all the suspicious lists. You're going to establish your reasonable monetary thresholds. You're going to limit deposits and ACH and credit to the appropriate alternative payment sources, meaning you don't want to bring in some crazy stuff, Bitcoin, those kinds of things. You want to make sure they're credible sources that are being allowed to deposit funds, that you know them, that they have audit processes in place, that they're not going to get you in trouble. Obviously prohibiting peer-to-peer transfers, obviously conducting proper geolocation within the markets, which I think Lindsay will touch on, ensuring cash out. And geolocation is important in payments as well, because if you're beginning to see that you're receiving a ton of transactions from the same IP address or the same location, you have to think, is this a guy in his basement with 100 fraudulent cards trying to hit me? In the payment space, we make a very small percentage of each transaction. So if you lose $1,000, it's going to take, I don't know, doing the math, probably $100,000 for us to make that up. You know, it's not something easy for us to take when you're selling cash. So combating money laundering, obviously there's a lot of safeguards that can be put in place, licensing, vetting the operators, requiring the AML processes to be in place, doing all the validation that I spoke about, extremely important. Enabling the account limits, you can have daily, weekly limits as well. I think responsible gaming plays a strong part in this. I think it helps in that role. And obviously having proper analytics, fraud detection, working with some of the service providers out there, doing proper device fingerprinting. There's just a ton out there that can really help root this out. And then just to touch on age verification a bit. Obviously, it's a big question. How do we know that somebody is 21? I think there's very good ways to vet the accounts. However, there's certainly a bit of trust. I think there's a bit that goes in the parents' hands. I think that I don't believe that this is a huge, I will say I don't believe this is a huge issue, but I think it's certainly something that needs to be addressed. But basically by doing proper KYC verification, doing the date of birth verification, looking for things and ensuring that they match each of the accounts. You can even, through some of these services, throw back challenge questions that maybe a child might not know of the parents. For instance, where's your mortgage? Which bank is it with? What kind of car did you register with the state in 1984? I don't know, but there's certainly a list of knowledge-based questions that companies like Experian and others can provide you. And our partner for this process is Experian, so I do use a little bit of their information here, but their data is constantly being updated. There's new credit applications continuously going in. They basically have access to 37 states for driver's license information. It includes a ton of data that's out there. Here's just a few statistics that they've provided me. I'm not sure if you can see that, but basically 200 plus million records related to credit applications that are being updated every day. Consumer credit data, hundreds of millions of records there. They use other data besides Experian. So the question always is what if you're not in that database? And I'm speaking to Experian, but certainly all the other KYC providers do the same. They roll up to things like utility databases, cellular phone databases, things that maybe somebody who doesn't have a credit rating would have done, would have purchased. So you can really effectively get at 98, 99% of the folks out there. There's always going to be corner cases. I take the opinion in everything I do that if I can manage 98, 99% of my base really, really, really well, that's probably better than worrying about a few of the corner cases that I might lose, especially if it's somebody that's unbanked or maybe isn't quite known today. I think that might be okay. I think you have to do certain things very, very, very well and do them as best as you can, and I think that's better for business. Certainly they have a huge fraud database that they're looking at every day as well. So I think there's a lot of good KYC providers out there, and they probably are, frankly, they're all sharing and buying a lot of the same data and databases. So that concludes. I don't know if there's any questions or.
Just one quick question. You used the term proxy piercing. What is that?
I might actually leave that to Lindsay to discuss, but basically it's trying to get through somebody's proxy on their PC as you want to make sure that they're not fraudulently disguising themselves, being able to go and go beyond their browser information, the information they're portraying to you. You almost don't rely on that. And is that something you touch on, Lindsay?
Yeah, I'll go over that. But
Okay.
pretty much looking at where a person's trying to pretend they are versus where they actually are, getting through to their original source location.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. Our next presenter will be Mark Vanderlinden. And Mark is our Director of Research and Problem Gambling for the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. Mark also serves as the lead for our large research project And I might say prior to joining the commission, Mark was Executive Officer of the Office of Problem Gambling Prevention at the Iowa Department of Public Health, and Mark serves on the Board of Directors for Problem Gambling Service Administration and the National Center for Responsible Gaming. So we've asked Mark to lay some foundation work and also introduce Mr. White. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. So in graduate school, I took a course on critical thinking, Dr. Eileen Gambrell. And she spent a lot of time talking about drilling down to what is the key answerable question. I think it was a fantastic course because, for one, I remember it. But one of the things that it fell short at was I can understand the need to identify the key answerable question, and that's fine, and I think that we're doing a good job of that, but it's finding the answer that goes without too much debate is the real challenge. And I think that I'm finding that day in and day out at the commission is drilling down to what is the true answer to these questions. So with that, I find for this topic that the key answerable question is, will legalization of online gambling lead to an increase in the rate of problem gambling and related social issues? So it's clear that there are fundamental differences between online gambling and what's legally available today in the US. But what impact will it have on who plays and how they play? So I'm just very briefly going to take these issues on, and I think that it's going to tee up Mr. White quite well. So the fundamental differences, just really briefly. Internet gambling provides greater convenience and easier access, for one. One can play while intoxicated. They can play while intoxicated and easily go unnoticed and without intervention. Internet gambling provides the ability to play on multiple sites and or games at once. Anonymity, or at least the perceived notion of anonymity. Some of the characteristics of online gambling may be particularly attractive to novice gamblers as they're learning this skill. It's a great way to practice, it's a great way to go and get some experience at this when you perhaps don't have the experience and have to go in front of a group of people. Those are some, certainly not all, of the differences between what you would see between online gambling and the traditional brick and mortar. One other factor that doesn't necessarily neatly fit into that, but I think that certainly deserves some attention is that between online gambling and traditional brick and mortar is that problem gamblers will have a much more difficult time avoiding gambling venues, which are at the click of a mouse. This is a particular concern for persons who are experiencing a gambling problem, as well as those who are recovering from a gambling problem. Second is I wanted to talk about what does the evidence tell us about the link between problem gambling and internet gambling. Certainly there's a growing body of evidence, and this is one of those areas where that we're finding some variation in what the evidence is telling us. Studies by Dr. Williams and Dr. Woods, funded by the Alberta Gaming Research Institute, found that the rate of problem gambling disorders 3 to 4 times higher among those who gambled on the internet compared to those non-internet gamblers. A second study, also by a well-known researcher, Dr. Mark Griffiths, and others, in 2007, a British gambling prevalence survey found that those who gambled on the internet were disproportionately represented by problem gamblers. This is where it gets a little bit more complicated, because certainly there is other types of evidence that we need to take into consideration when we look at this issue. Not so far from home, we have Dr. Howard Schaefer, Dr. Debbie LaPlante, and others at the Division on Addiction, Cambridge Health Alliance. They studied the actual wagering transactions of 40,000 online gamblers on the bwin website, which is one of the largest gambling companies in the world. They found that a majority of the bwin players wagered moderately when compared to the overall betting patterns of other subscribers. They also found that approximately 5% of the online gamblers studied appeared to engage in what they considered to be, quote, excessive betting behavior patterns in terms of time and or money spent. It should be noted that this was not a diagnostic tool, so they weren't able to actually diagnose whether or not these individuals had had a gambling disorder, but their behaviors that they were able to track were in line with a gambling problem. Their conclusion it was that the gamblers that were gambling online appeared to be consistent with the overall prevalence of gambling disorders population-wide. So really no difference between those who are gambling online versus those who are not gambling online. Second, how many people are gambling on the internet anyway? And are they problem gamblers? In California, Dr. Rachel Bolberg, who's with us today, did a study in California in 2006. And she found that although only 2% of the respondents ever gambled on the internet, 11% of those individuals are classified as pathological gamblers or with gambling disorders, and another 19% were classified as subclinical or problem gamblers. In Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Council on Compulsive Gambling led a study last summer, the Massachusetts Statewide Gambling Behavior, Opinions, and Needs Assessment. They found that only 3% of social gamblers had ever bet in the last 12 months on an internet casino, and almost all of them only played a few times in the past year. About 15% of persons taking the survey met the SOGS criteria for problem gamblers, and that had bet within the last 12 months, or 12% had bet once a week or greater. And approximately 45% of all persons taking the survey that met the SOGS criteria for probable pathological gambler have bet money in the last 12 months on an internet casino. 30% had bet once per week or greater. This is something that we're going to be following up on as well through our Sigma study. As we take a look at what are the gambling behaviors of persons living in Massachusetts, internet gambling is certainly one of the types of gambling that we'll be paying close attention to. In Iowa, where I had come from before moving to the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts, in 2011, we conducted a study that looked at the gambling attitudes and behaviors. Found that 5% of adult Iowans had ever gambled on the internet, and 2% within the last 30 days. The fact was that internet was actually one of the least reported gambling types that was out there. It was beat out by Keno, it was beat out by high-risk financial trading, and a whole host of other types of gambling behaviors. In a separate study evaluating our treatment services in Iowa in 2013, so looking at individuals who actually came and sought out treatment for a gambling disorder, 4% had said that they'd gambled on the internet in the last 30 days prior to seeking treatment. Interestingly, and kind of drilling that down a little bit further, only 17% of that 4% had indicated that internet was the primary way in which they had gambled, while 29% said it was secondary and 53% said it was tertiary, which kind of lends to this idea that internet gambling is typically something that people add on to their repertoire of gambling behaviors. So I'm sure you're not surprised to hear that it's a complicated issue. Research has yet to reach a consensus. A couple things I am certain of. I'm certain that legalization of online gambling will lead to risks. I'm also certain that it'll lead to certain opportunities to implement safeguards to promote responsible gambling. Safeguards that simply don't exist in the type of gambling that we have legally available today. Leading that charge, and I think one of the great forward thinkers on this issue is Keith White. Keith and the National Council on Problem Gambling have led a number of different initiatives on this, looking forward to the advent of legalization across the country. So I'll let him describe this further, but let me introduce him real quick. Keith White has over 19 years of public policy experience at the national level, including more than 17 years of involvement with gaming and problem gambling issues. Recognized internationally for his work on gaming policy, Mr. White has presented on gambling issues in 39 states and 13 countries. He has testified before the United States Congress 4 times and appeared before numerous state legislative and regulatory bodies. He has written numerous articles, studies, book chapters on gambling, and is frequently quoted. many different areas. I won't go into all of those, but I'm going to turn it over to Keith. Thank you so much, Keith.
Yeah, it's not all that, but so let me, while I'm, I think, going to try and bring up my presentation. Here it is. So I really appreciate the chance to be here, and again, I just really commend the commission for taking an opportunity to provide a real thorough look at a lot of these issues. This is, gosh, I can't remember the third, fourth time I've come up here for y'all. And again, it's just a fantastic opportunity, as we were talking at the break, to engage in a discussion with all the stakeholders, which is part of the mission of the National Council and our Massachusetts chapter as well, to bring everybody together from the pro-gambling side, media, impartial, neutral folks like us, regulators, to discuss some of these issues and try and find some common solutions. So what I'd like to do today is very briefly hit on the internet gaming, especially social gambling, which I think is one of the most exciting areas, and look at it from a regulatory perspective. What is it that you may face as you go down the road? And so again, for those of you who don't know, the National Council on Problem Gambling was founded in 1972. We're neutral on legalized gambling. And so, we are here mainly to advocate for problem gamblers and their families. So one of the things that that we've looked at a lot, and what I think's been a little bit missing from this discussion today, even, is the fact that obviously internet gambling is already here. There's a lot of flavors of it already, and so what I try to do is look at what's available here in Massachusetts today, whether or not it's legal. But if you're a gambler, especially if you're a problem gambler, what do you have access to now online? All right, and so we have, you've got racing, which is, I think, curiously left out. Racing has had sort of, as well as, they've had a kind of a monopoly on legalized internet gambling ever since, going back to the OTB and phone wagering days, but certainly since the passage of the Interstate Horse Racing Act, which the Federal Department of Justice has never challenged, which has given them, in most states, if you see here, can anyone be a TVG subscriber? And it says, yes, to open a TVG account, you must be at least 21 years of age and operate in a state where racing services are available. And it goes on to list all the states, including Massachusetts. Although there's a little note here that residents of Massachusetts may not be able to place wagers on certain tracks. I'm not sure what that's about. I'm sure Dominic or someone else can tell us. But so, according to TVG at least, and most of the other national online racing providers, you're perfectly able to wager online as long as you're playing the ponies from Massachusetts, and you can bet on tracks all over the place. So then you've got lottery, obviously. In Massachusetts, while they're not selling tickets directly over the internet, like many lotteries, has been creeping ever closer to this. So you've got your VIP, your red carpet VIP club, which gives you all sorts of second chance sweepstakes and all sorts of other things. And we see this, quite frankly, the lottery is probably the second most aggressive mover in the non-casino space. And again, we've been, there's, I think James said, a dozen states that are in some way, shape, or form selling, subscribing, VIP club online, and there's some very interesting things happening on the lottery side. And then, of course, you've got, casino. We look at here, Satoshi Dice. Bitcoin's been in the news lately, but Satoshi Dice, one of the first Bitcoin sites, was a casino, and there are now hundreds of internet casinos that take, and you can bet in Bitcoins. And you've got, I think sweepstakes gets left out a little bit, but anybody that's gone to the Publishers Clearinghouse site, and there's a lot of folks like Publishers Clearinghouse, this is an aggressive proto-gambling site. You would not believe, if you go on to publishersclearinghouse.com and you give them your email address, when I was preparing this presentation, I've now received over 20 emails from Publishers Clearinghouse in the past week telling me desperately to go online. I'm going to lose my chance if I don't go online right now and click on their site right now to win my $7,000 today. Has to be today. You got to click today. You'll lose your chance forever. I mean, it's unbelievable, these guys. And of course, this is, so it's traditional sweepstakes, but, win $7,000 for life, bigger bucks, millions. To me, this looks a lot like, it may not be a gambling site, but it looks a lot like gambling type activity. And that brings us, of course, to social. You have, of course, companies like Double Down and others that are doing, I think, a very good job of this, but there are a lot of competitors in the social space, and I'll focus on this a little bit more, that are doing things like Bible slots. All right, you're not going to find this in a regulated market. Bible slots is, of course, gambling-related activity, and I think it's funny, if you will. But and then we can't leave out fantasy sports. So you've got social, you've got fantasy sports, you've got social fantasy sports, and this really interesting combination of daily social fantasy sports, which is exploiting a UIGA carve-out and some gray areas in the law to create some daily fantasy leagues for money and for lots of money, and I think that's an emerging industry as well. So this is what's available today. We don't even know what's going to be available tomorrow, given the innovation in this sector. And obviously, we've got some concerns about the downside. I want to be very clear. We're not saying that social gambling by definition is bad, but we think that the limited age in KYC verification is an issue. So you heard some great stuff about what we're doing on the AML and KYC side on the real money sites, but many of these same operators are operating social sites with little or no age or KYC verification. I'll get to that in a second. We know also that, especially among youth, video and social gaming is correlated with gambling behavior. So if you're likely to do one, you're also likely to get into another, and that's we know. Of course, early onset of gambling is associated with problem gambling. And some social gaming features associated with addiction, and we're specifically looking at things like high rates of play, both frequency and duration, some of the opaque terms and conditions, the game mechanics of this. And it seems, I think, fairly clear, and we've talked about this morning, recreational gamblers may not converge. You may have folks that are just playing social, they're going to stay on the social side, and that's fine. A couple years ago, that was the big question, is whether or not you're going to be able to, as we were talking earlier about cross-platform. And I think some of that happens, but not as much as we thought. But problem gamblers may well converge. They have much higher rates of participation in gambling and gambling-type activity, cross-platform. And so while your recreational folks may stay in one channel or the other, the people that are perhaps sometimes your heaviest customers may cross-platform. If you look at the numbers of people that are gambling on social casino sites, so that's about 200 million monthly average users. Just at the general population level, if those were just average folks, that's about 2 to 3 million monthly social gambling customers that are likely, just based on the general population average, to have gambling problems. Now, that's not even accounting for the fact that if they're heavy into gambling, they may be more likely, as Mark said, they may be more likely to have gambling problems. But so some percentage of users are likely people that also have gambling addiction. Now, it's not a causal factor, but it's just if the general population, if those numbers are true, it's at least a couple million people a month that are playing on social sites that may also have problems, and so there may be some opportunities to catch them. And again, because this is classified kind of legally and technically as not gambling, there's no regulation, period, in most jurisdictions, which is I think an issue, whether it's self-regulation or gambling commission-led regulation, and it's moving and evolving so quickly. So let's look at kind of what we are. One of the things that concerns us. So this on the left is what I get on my Facebook page, because I go to a lot of these sites. Warning, highly addictive. And that's actually seen as a positive thing, right? In the gaming world, highly addictive, in the gaming, small g, like video game, highly addictive is a good thing. And when you're doing a social gambling site, that the term highly addictive, to me, is pejorative. In the gaming side of things, that's a great thing. World of Warcraft is so addictive, let's go on it. So there's a terminology that's odd. Obviously you've got appeals, for guys. New slots game that pays you $6 million given away during the tournament. But this is what really concerns us a little bit, which you wouldn't see in the regulated market. The exhortation to play every day. The more you play on this particular site, the more chips you're going to get. And if you stop playing, days in a row bonus chips. But watch out. If you miss a day, you've got to start over. So it's a real exhortation, a real aggressive encouragement to play every single day, to always play every day, or else you're going to lose. You're going to get a lot more if you keep playing every single day. And, again, that's something in the regulated side we don't see very often. You've got some other social factors that are kind of interesting. The monetization of this, I think it's important to say, as we said earlier, most people on the social sites will not monetize. You're looking at 2% or so, by and large. But those who do, it's pretty interesting. So you see here, it's hard. You can buy 1 trillion chips for $4.99. All right, trillion chips. How can you possibly, lose a trillion chips? Well, this site, the average bet, the minimum bet's like $1 billion. And most people are betting like 500 million. You go on, it's hilarious. But then you get down here at the bottom here, 175 trillion chips for $299, $499. And of course, at the bottom here, what are you taking? Credit. And again, you can spend a lot of money on a free-to-play game. And I won't go into the difference between the freemium model and free-to-play, except to say that you don't have to buy chips in most of these sites, but when you run out, that's when you start to buy. That's when you start to buy in. So here we look at another. We look at another daily bonus screen where there's some pro-social things, inviting your friends, but you're looking at again, bonus every day. You got to play every day to get your full bonus. Play more, and you'll get more. Bonus for successful games. The more you win, the bigger your bonus is. So there's some really interesting, and this is just a fraction of what's out there. I guess it's just to say that there's some very interesting stuff, aggressive stuff. And again, we're not as concerned on the social side about stuff like Farmville. I don't care how many silos you buy. There may be some people that have problems with that. They're mainly people with impulse control disorders. It's not a gambling addiction. This is gambling. All right, I mean, it may legally not be gambling, but it's gambling-like. It's poker, blackjack, craps. I mean, we saw, James said, I mean, these are the slot titles that you have in your casino. They just happen to be online, and because it's on Facebook and because you can start to play for free, it's somehow treated, well, not somehow, it is treated very differently under law and regulation. What we see today, and this is from some IPOs, is that free tends to be more lucrative than pay, which is pretty interesting. But if you think about the psychology of gambling, especially the psychology of addiction, that makes a lot of sense. So you can't really see this, but what I'll tell you is the green bar is King, which is the maker of Candy Crush. And when you drill into their IPO, as our friends at Gambling Compliance did, thank you guys, what you'll find is that their conversion rates are up here at about 4%. In other words, 4% of their players start to pay to get somewhere bonus on Candy Crush versus about 1.5% for Caesars. However, when you look at the average revenue per user, the monthly revenue average per user, it's obviously the social casino sites are doing much better than Candy Crush. But what it turns out to is that Caesars is grossing twice the amount of money from their free players as they are from their real money players. So if you go to WorldSeriesOfPoker.com, you play on the average twice as less as you play on their free sites, which I just think is fascinating. And you've got whales in the social gaming space. So this comes from the industry trades. You had one guy, I don't know if he was boasting or bragging or just making a joke, but we had one player that spent over $13,000 over 3 months on one of our free-to-play sites. And this is where, unfortunately, when you get into social gaming, because it's not seen as gambling, what you have are some interesting things like this. These services are intended for 21 years of age. Great, we love it. But without diminishing the foregoing, you've got to be 13. And if you're under the age of 18, you declare that you've got the consent of a guardian. That's checking a box. I have guardian consent. And just to reiterate, really the minimum age here is 13 years old. And that's all. If you're not doing good KYC, if you're relying on Facebook to verify your age, that's probably fair because that's really all you're going to get. Facebook's not doing good KYC. So you wind up having to rely on that platform to verify your age. And so this is from the Delaware Lottery. This is a state-regulated site that was set up before their live internet real money site went up to familiarize players with the games that are going to be offered. So that was the purpose of setting up this site, to make sure that people knew. And they went into it saying that really anybody 13 and up can become familiar with ours, and we want to transfer them into the real money side. I've asked Delaware, how many people under 21 signed up in this site? And why would you set up a legalized, regulated site that's intended to be 21, but really it's 13 plus? That doesn't, to me, that seems like there's some issues there. Again, knowing everything we know about youth gambling access, and haven't heard back from them yet. So what we hear a lot, though, is that, again, regulation, this is not gambling, and if you try and regulate, it's going to kill the industry. All right, I think regulations actually worked pretty well, especially in gambling. You know, we've known that the gambling has always had to meet a higher historical bar. And, you know, I think $119 billion in revenues last year. I mean, I think that's a fairly successful industry that's heavily regulated. So I understand that there's a concern about regulation and overregulation, and we encourage voluntary self-regulation. But in the absence of that, it's important to have, from a commission perspective, a thought about, you know, how maybe to look at social. We all know, obviously, you know, the other big argument for this is that, well, you can't win money, which is true. But for addicts, it's not about the money. You know, people don't develop a gambling problem because they're interested in just winning money. They develop a gambling problem because they're preoccupied, they're obsessed. You know, it's the action that they seek. And right now they say, well, we're not required to do the same regulations we would on a real money site. So we're not going to do it until you can prove that there's a problem. And it's sort of saying we're going to be responsible when you make us be responsible. You know, let's be positive. Let's get out of the gate and say, you know, we're going to, in an abundance of caution, we're going to adopt some of this stuff. Because we know that there's lots of good reasons to do responsible gaming because it's good customer service, you know, because it builds good support. Because it mitigates individual harms and ensures sustainability. If you don't want to be regulated, a good argument would be do it yourself ahead of time. So as Mark said, we've tried to get a little bit ahead of the curve. We launched our internet standards in 2012, our social consumer protection in 2013, and what I'll talk about real briefly is our review of the New Jersey and a review of the regulations. We took best practice from around the world, where there's, in some cases, we've got a decade's worth of experience. So we went to the very good jurisdictions, took their standards, distilled them down, kind of, you know, frankly, reduced them a little bit for the United States market. And they're mainly in 8 areas. And they track extremely well with the Massachusetts Responsible Gaming Framework because it's based on a public health and informed player choice model. And we've consulted with all 3 of these jurisdictions. We've encouraged them to adopt the standards. And what you're looking at is in some cases, between, a little bit more than between half to 2/3 of the regulations were put into place in each of these jurisdictions. But it's a fascinating, everybody did it a little bit differently. Some folks did real heavily on self-exclusion. Others, did research, but not this. So, like I said, I won't go into in detail. These are all publicly available on our website. We encourage that. This is a great framework. If you want to get into the internet gambling business, sort of on the responsible gambling side, we're telling you, here's what you need to do. And if you're already operating in a jurisdiction internationally, you're already doing it. Because if you're operating in a well-regulated place, you can already meet every single one of these standards. And it's, of course, we believe unfortunate that the 3 commissions that have gone on the casino side so far have not adopted these fully, but we'll keep working. On the social gaming side, so our acronym is GRADE. It applies, again, to gambling like monetized games. I'm going to stay out of your Farmville. I don't want to know about your cows. We believe there needs to be responsible gaming, or call it consumer protection, if you will, if it's not legally gambling. So we'll call it consumer protection. That's fine. Age controls. Again, if you're going to say these games are intended to be 21, but I'm going to allow you to play at 13, I don't think that's acceptable. I don't think that's accurate when it's a gambling-like game. If you want to play Candy Crush at 13, go ahead. Feel free. That's all right. But if you're monetizing aggressively at hundreds of dollars a transaction, and you can't tell me if you're 16 or not, that's a problem. Data-driven research, as Mark said, there's a lot we know, and there's a lot more we want to know. The analytics on this, as Tim said, are incredible, and they can really lead us into some great places. And then player education. Let's give people some understanding of the odds and randomness. And I think there's very pro-social ways to do this. If you're giving people free coins, why not give them free coins to fill out a little risk quiz, or watch a 30-second video on responsible gaming, or 20,000 free coins if you set your limits. You don't have to set a limit, but you can. There's some very pro-social ways with social gaming to use what's great and rich and unique about that to also deliver responsible gaming experience. We're not seeing a lot of that, but we're optimistic that operators will embrace some of these steps. So just to wrap up, I think for the commission, one of the things that you think about in this space is, we're kind of trying to wrap our arms around what's here now, and that's changing tomorrow. We have to think outside the box. It obliterates all these traditional distinctions we make in law and practice and regulation between what's bingo and what is Keno and what is racing. You know, you're seeing some amazing hybrids. You're seeing a lot of aggressive stuff. You know, daily fantasy sports is technically not gambling related, but people use it much like it is. Every aspect of the game can be manipulated. I won't talk about reflexive odds and algorithms very much, except to say that on many social sites, you don't play the game plays you. So you can't calculate odds because it really doesn't have odds. The game itself will say, if you've lost a lot, then we'll sort of change the algorithm so that you win more, because we want you to play, we want you to stay on this device as long as possible, or come back and play as many times per day as possible. And again, it may look like a gambling game, but it plays absolutely not like one at all. And there's not always a lot of transparency in either the game mechanic itself or when you're transferring between a game that is random and a game that is not. You know, it evolves on a daily basis. You know, we see sites that are doing alpha beta testing where players, the site's changing within the hour or within the day based on who's monetizing the most. And so what was there tomorrow may not be there today, literally. And but I think, as Mark said, there's a lot we can do on the internet. We're very pro responsible gaming on the internet. I think there's some fantastic things we could do. On the internet side, we've got that down. I mean, I think we know very well what you can do, and it's contained in our standards to minimize risk for internet gambling. You'll never eliminate it, but I think you can really minimize it. So that's known. I mean, that's done. I think social, we don't know as much, and I'm very sensitive to the need that we don't want to, you know, smash an industry that there may not be massive problems, but I think there's a lot of concerns and risk there that we do need to address. So that's where I think it can be both more risky and more responsible, and it's how we all address it, but it's especially, I think, relevant for the commission. So yeah, with that I'll wrap up, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'll have to hold questions a little bit if we can, because we're way over our time limit here. And if we can hold them and get them right at the end, if we've got time, I'd appreciate it. I'd like to make sure we've got sufficient time for Lindsay Kinnemuth, pardon me. I did it anyway, Lindsay, my pronunciation here. Lindsay is Operations Manager for GeoComply, a geolocation technology solution provider to the regulated gambling online industry. Since launching in 2011, GeoComply has quickly become the industry's trusted solution for reliable, accurate, and precise geolocation services. Prior to GeoComply, Lindsay spent 5 years in business market development at GLI in the gaming compliance testing company, serving both iGaming and land-based markets. During that time, she worked with some of the largest operators and vendors in North America, as well as regulators across Europe and North America. So, Lindsay, we appreciate you taking your time to talk to us about geolocation, location technology, and it's all yours.
Thanks a lot, Rick, and thanks very much to the Commission for inviting me, telling you everything you need to know about geolocation in about 15 minutes. And I think, what's going on here? Unplug it? No signal.
Mr. Chairman, you had a question while we're doing our technology here. Maybe we can get that into Keith, and then
I was interested, Keith, you talked about social gaming, and at first I thought you were operating with the same definition that we had earlier, which was without any investment for a potential gambling return. Then your models had racing and had fantasy football and so forth, and I'm not sure what you were. So what definition of social gaming were you using in that presentation?
Well, I think that's exactly the point, is that social gaming is what you think it is. So it's no one knows. So it's any game, we would say, it's any game that you play on a social network that doesn't have, at least initially, one of the 3 legal elements. So it doesn't have either prize, chance, or consideration. And so many of these games you don't start out with those three. One of the elements is missing. Let's say traditionally it's prize. You know, you can only win virtual coins, or you don't have to pay to play. But then once you get within the game, you actually, I would argue, start meeting a lot of these criteria. You know, you're paying to play within the game. So even though it's free to start, you're paying to play. But there's you know, there's virtual social fantasy racing. I mean, it's just this amazingly evolving industry. So it's very hard to put your hands around what actually is social. You know, I guess another way to say it would be anything that's on a social network that's not regulated as gambling, but uses gambling mechanics. And that's where we see a lot of, frankly, concerns. You know, there's lots of different ways to deliver gambling, taking out one of these elements using technology and social networks, but it still looks and feels and plays in many ways like gambling and may have some negative impacts. If that answers your question. I mean, it's a hard thing to get your hands around. It's a very hard thing.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. And I think, are we ready, Lindsay?
I don't know.
Keith and Mark, special appreciation.
think I need
This
your
is
help
Gambling
one more time.
Awareness, Problem Gambling
That's
Awareness
right.
Month, so
We
we should
forgot
have
to-
some acknowledge of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Change the aspect ratio.
Almost.
Yeah, and actually today is National Problem Gambling Screening Day, the Harvard Medical School's day.
Oh, that's right.
So we're uniting healthcare providers across the country to screen their clients, at least on this day. People that are coming in for alcohol problems, even physical health problems, say, you know, have you gambled in the past year? And if so, started asking them 3 questions, and we're getting some really interesting results.
Do you have any idea what
Yeah.
level of participation you've got on that?
I think so. Talking to Harvard, the last time we had over 40 organizations across the nation, and we don't know yet their catchment areas, but it's probably in the thousands already. Based on these 40 organizations, they'll see thousands of clients within this day, or at least within the week, that will receive a basic gambling screen. And we're trying to, you know, we're going to see how far we can work back and get the results of that. But yeah, it's just been a wonderful effort.
Great.
Thanks much, Keith. I think we're ready. And
Okay.
Lindsay, go right ahead. We're just going right next door for lunch, so I think we want to make sure we've got
Hopefully you
taken
guys can hold out a little bit longer on that hunger. So as a lot of people mentioned this morning, geolocation seems to have become a very crucial part to making online gaming happen, especially in the US, where you pretty much need to stay within the walls of the state. And I think the technology that's available right now, quite recently, is really remarkable in how it can make that happen. So adding the internet really adds a whole bunch of new challenges when you're trying to define a jurisdiction. You have an activity that traditionally people play in person. Trying to find them when they're at home playing really brings about questions like, where exactly are they? How are you going to block them if you need to? Is it legal for them to access this kind of a site? Or what kind of device are they using? How are they accessing the gaming site? What tools can you use to control that activity? So as regulated iGaming continues to grow across the US, these are all going to be really important questions for the stakeholders involved. So talking about federal legislation, UGIA pretty much says that you need to have be within the walls of a state in order for internet gaming to occur. You also have to have enabling legislation for such actions, and you also have to have the proper location verification tools in place to ensure that the player is where they say they are within the state itself. Various states have also enacted legislation about geolocation, namely New Jersey, Nevada, and Delaware. I also mentioned Utah here because they explicitly ban internet gaming. Why is that relevant to the state of Massachusetts? If there is an online gaming site here that accepts a bet from someone in Utah, there's obviously various criminal or civil implications involved across state lines and on the federal level as well. But really what all of the state legislation has in common is that it talks about geolocation in very broad terms, using reasonably designed or reasonable certainty, or the ability to reasonably detect where a player is. It's quite vague and is really up to the directives of that specific state to determine how geolocation tools are going to be mandated. And it can often get quite specific depending on how the user is accessing the site, what kind of a device they're using, how they're accessing the internet varies greatly. But really the main goal is to create a first line of defense to ensure that someone out of state is not getting in when they're not supposed to. And the implications of allowing them in, of course, range anywhere from fines to shutting down a site or perhaps jeopardizing a land-based license for a casino operator, which has massive implications for them. So a very small slip-up can really cause widespread peril. So how exactly does geolocation work? Geolocation is really any technology that you may use to locate a player online. When we're talking about online gaming, we use a bunch of different location data pieces to find out where you may be. There are a number of methods at your disposal, and really depending on how the player is accessing the gaming product and what device they're using, you may want to use a full gamut of these types of location data sources, IP addresses, Wi-Fi, GPS. There's various methods of cell tower geolocation. And I think what we've learned in places like New Jersey is that you're going to need the ability to draw on all these types of sources to be able to locate your players effectively. And it might depend, whether they're on their cell phone or whether they're on their laptop. Having a full range of these types of tools at your disposal is going to ensure the most success for finding your players and making sure that you aren't excluding ones that might even be eligible and for some reason can't get on. But depending on what source you draw upon, you can find out information not only about the state or city that they're in, but even maybe the name of the street and the latitude and longitude of their location. And the idea being that the more of these sources you have, the better it will be to achieve this reasonable certainty that the legislation often talks about. Relying on one source alone, if that single source is being spoofed, if it's a fake location, it doesn't carry much weight at all if you can't trust it. So what exactly does geolocation look like? This is a little video showing you, we'll zoom in closely on New Jersey, of geolocations passing in New Jersey. You'll see a couple red flags, people that can't get on that are out of state. But live gaming is happening in the US right now in a few jurisdictions, and geolocation tools are making that happen. If you look at New Jersey, you can see the state line along the Hudson River is really pinpointing where that fine line is between the state and ensuring that people can play right up to the border but not across it. So just to talk a little bit about New Jersey, more specifically, what's happening there right now is, I think, quite remarkable. There's more than 5.5 million geolocations happening per month. And most of that play is happening within a very small distance from the border. So the advanced technology that's available, even in just the last 1 to 2 years, has enabled play right up to that border in very densely populated areas. And I think New Jersey is quite relevant to the state of Massachusetts because it's also a very small state. You have more than 6.5 million people. There's bound to be a lot of potential players near the border, and you need to be able to accurately pinpoint which side of the border that they're on. Talking about New Jersey, most of the population is coming from the greater New York area and the Philly area. And when we look more closely at what's happening on the map, you can see there's people playing up to a block from the Hudson River. So you have the ability to block out the people that are just over the line, but make sure that those close to it are still able to play. Talking about Massachusetts, this is what you could envision as a play zone. So technically, if you were on a boat and you were still within the waters of the state, you would have the ability to geofence playing activity within an area like this. And then if there were specific requirements to block off certain areas like schools or government buildings, libraries, tribal reservations, you would also have the ability to do that. Talking about spoofing or faking your location, pretending you are somewhere where you're not. Like I said, if the information that you gather on a player's location is not trusted, it's pretty much worthless. So you need to ensure that there are layers of checks to make sure that no one is spoofing their location, that the data that you have on them is where they actually are. And right now, if you go to YouTube, you can watch all kinds of 2-minute videos on how easy it is to make it look like you're somewhere else. You can spoof your IP address very, very easily. Mark mentioned a study that the Iowa Racing and Gaming Commission did in 2011. One of the things that they determined in that study was that IPs can be spoofed so easily, some other means of technology has to be in place to ensure that doesn't happen. You can go to a free proxy site, pick from a drop-down menu where you want to be in the world, and within a second you're already somewhere else. So unless you're checking to make sure that the player isn't using a service like that, you are going to have a lot of problems. Also, using a VPN to connect remotely to another location. It's something people do all the time to log into their work network remotely. It also gives you the ability to make it look like you're somewhere you're not and remote into the state of Massachusetts if you're on a work trip back in New York or anywhere else in the world. You have to have the ability to check to see if the player is using those types of programs and assess the risk of whether or not that is going to compromise an operator. Remote desktop software, similarly, pretty much gives you the ability to remotely control a computer. You might have used GoToMyPC or GoToMeeting for a webinar. TeamViewer, LogMeIn, these are all very common programs. If they are running on a player's device, there is a very large risk that they could, in fact, be in another state. You need to be checking for these along with making sure that the location data you have on the player is consistent with what you need to accept. If you're on a mobile device, there are also further risks like mobile apps that you can use for GPS spoofing. If you have a phone that's been jailbroken or hacked, you can upload programs that might not be allowed in the App Store that are legal and accepted. Unless you're looking for those specific spoofing applications, someone could easily be using them and you would unknowingly be accepting an illegal bet. So it's really important to be scanning in a whole bunch of places the activity of the player and the programs that they're running at the time that the bet is taking place. So really, I think I need to say that you should expect to require some kind of advanced geolocation technology. It's going to be needed to make sure that you're federally compliant, that you're compliant with state regulations, whatever does end up happening here in Massachusetts, that you're looking at multiple sources of location data to cross-reference that information and make sure that it's indeed trusted and hasn't been spoofed, that you're layering on spoofing checks to make sure that the information you have on where that player is really is where they say they are. And supporting geolocation methods across all devices. The way that you need to find a player is very different on a desktop computer as opposed to an Android phone, and you have to have technology that's been specifically designed to collect the location data on each of those devices. So the way that the player accesses the game, even kind of what game they're playing, the internet connection that they're using, and what type of access to cell towers or Wi-Fi or any kind of location services, those all impact how you can find them and how successfully you can find them. So thank you very much. I'm not sure if anyone has any questions on that.
Lindsay, just you mentioned the location services, so how did they work together? I mean, so there's not one method of verification, but there's several methods that are used to reduce the risk and make sure somebody's where they are. Can you talk a little bit about how they actually work together?
Yeah, in somewhere like New Jersey, they look at the different kinds of location data available and decide which ones are highly accurate, like GPS or Wi-Fi, and able to pinpoint your location within a very small margin of error. And then something that's used more traditionally, like an IP address, that would help identify what language to display a website to a player, say if you were in Europe, for instance, is a good guideline for that secondary check. But isn't going to provide you the accurate information that you need as a primary determinant of where that player is. So it really depends what device you're on and how they're playing. And if you're on a mobile device, you have tools like GPS available to you, whereas if you have a player playing poker on their laptop at home, you won't necessarily have the ability to find them by something like GPS.
Questions, Mr. Chairman?
You didn't exactly say this, but I guess it's implicit that a company like yours has the technology to defeat all those spoofing and fraud strategies, or the lion's share of them. I assume that's what you think, right?
No, I mean, I think it's safe to say there's no system that's 100% unspoofable, just like someday someone's going to hack into a bank system, someone's going to hack into an FBI database. If you have the time and money and resources to make it happen, we'll never tell you that it's impossible. But going back to what federal regulations require, saying reasonable certainty, reasonably designed, if you had to be a defendant in court, I know I definitely want to say, here are all the ways we check the player's location, here are all the different spoofing checks we did, to go to reasonable lengths to make sure they were where they said they were. If the player is moving beyond that, at that point, it's more of a malicious player that is looking, set out to thwart the system and defraud the system, as opposed to your average player.
How do you know how many you're not getting?
That's a good question. You'd have to ask Eric from the DGE what if he has any players that are calling him saying, "Hey, I'm in Massachusetts and I've been playing on your site." It's really hard to know. We're not aware of any specific players in New Jersey that are accessing websites there from out of state, but we also understand that no system is foolproof. But the main challenge we are finding day to day is based on how robust and conservative the regulations are in somewhere like New Jersey, you obviously put a lot of roadblocks in front of players, and they really have to be an eager player to overcome those, along with the payment methods that they need to deal with, the checks that they've never done before, KYC. Those are all hurdles that they have to overcome, and there's definitely a small percentage of players that want to play that are in New Jersey, and because of one reason or another, what program they have running on their computer, they're being blocked when they should in fact be allowed in. So minimizing that percentage of players, those false negatives, is a challenge that operators would have to deal with on a regular basis.
You talked about the system, the geolocation system, has to be able to recognize all kinds of different devices, the Android device, the different platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Is the default that if you can't recognize the device, you can't get in, or can somebody with an unrecognizable device?
You'll always be able to see the device or what the operating system is. The
Yeah.
challenge will be making sure all the right signals are available. So do they have Wi-Fi turned on? Is GPS available, or are they on an old desktop? Because the desktop's not going to have GPS. Gathering enough sources of location information is usually the main challenge, as opposed to trying to figure out what device they're on specifically. But each device has its own device information that you can use for even for payments or responsible gaming. So the same way that you may block a player from out of state, you can also block them based on their IP address or the fingerprint that we take of their specific device. So there's a lot of crossover, and the geolocation tools that may not be the design for that specifically, but the information that's gathered when you locate a player is useful for a number of other verification checks.
But reframed slightly, my question, I should have said, if you don't know where the player is the
Mm-hmm.
player excluded?
Yeah. If you
Okay.
can't accurately pinpoint them where you need them to be, they can't get on.
Okay.
And it would be up to the regulator to define what's that threshold for
Right.
pass and fail, and also up to the operator to determine what level of risk they're willing to take on before they say pass or fail.
Thank you.
Just one more, I know nothing about this, but there must be some kind of a system where you could feed back to the person who wants to play something that was your system for identifying where they were, and they couldn't play unless they used that software or that mechanism.
Well, I mean, geolocation is usually embedded in the gaming software itself, so it's automatically triggered in the background. If you were trying to feed into that, like through like a remote connection, some sort of a program that allows you to remotely access or remotely control that computer, someone like GeoComply would be searching for that activity and detect it right away. But no one's going to stop a guy from calling his friend in New Jersey and saying, hey, log into my account, here's my password, and you know, use my credit card to deposit this money. I mean, that's technically, you still have the person that's taking the action of the bet itself is still where they need to be. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Well, Lindsay, before somebody is blocked, there's a series of tests basically they would have to go through before they would actually be blocked, isn't there?
Yeah, it all happens in the matter of a second or two, but a bunch of location data is collected, then that data is run through checks for spoofing activity, and then it's filtered against the rules that would have been set out by the regulator of the jurisdiction to determine what constitutes a pass or a fail. So was the information accurate enough? Were they within the state like they were supposed to be? Did they have the right data sources around? That would all constitute a pass or a fail, and is completely configurable.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, panelists. Appreciate the time and the discussion. It just so happens after lunch our topic is going to be, we've got a representative from Nevada, Delaware, Ontario, and New Jersey to talk with about some of the things we were just working. Come back.
What time?
About 1:30. So.